Looking for excitement? Chumba Casino is here. Play anytime, play anywhere. Play on the train, play at the store, play at home, play when you're bored. Play today for your chance to win and get daily bonuses when you log in. So what are you waiting for? Don't delay. Chumba Casino is free to play.
Experience social gameplay like never before. Go to Chumba Casino right now to play hundreds of games, including online slots, bingo, Slingo, and more. Live the Chumba life at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
This is VOCM Open Line. Call 709-273-5211 or 1-888-590-8626. The views and opinions of this program are not necessarily those of this station. The biggest conversation in Newfoundland and Labrador starts now. Here's VOCM Open Line host Paddy Daly.
Well, all right, and good morning to you. Thank you very much for tuning into the program. It's Monday, July the 8th. This is Open Line. I'm your host, Paddy Daly. David Williams, he's produced the program. Let's get the week off to a flying start. That requires your participation. So if you're in the St. John's metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue and on the air, 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, it's toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM. That's 8626. So as you heard Brian Medora mention in the VOCM newscast, no Copa America action today, no Euro action today, but there will indeed be lots of action come tomorrow. So great time of life for soccer fans. And what a result for Canada on Friday night over Venezuela. Get through in the knockout stage and penalties. They go on to face Argentina, the defending World Cup champions, tomorrow evening. And of course, they're really up against it, against Argentina, to say the very least. Upsets are part of soccer, though. There was an upset in one of the other quarters. Uruguay beat Brazil, knocked them out. And, of course, Brazil, perennial champions. So, anyway, Canada in with the shot, but albeit a long shot against Argentina. And on the soccer front, you know, someone sent me an email over the weekend about Canada's victory there, but then also attached the reference to somehow there's been a decision made for the provincial government of Newfoundland and Labrador to sponsor a 4th Division English soccer team, Barrow AFC. So it is sort of a strange thing. We don't even know how many eyeballs will ever be on those jerseys. Of course, the deal is $171,000 over 2 years to put the government's logo, well, however it's going to look, on the front of their jerseys. So, again, big questions. We've heard Minister Jerry Byrne talk about it being an immigration tool. You would think that it'd be more of a tourism tool than an immigration tool, but it's a strange set of circumstances. It would still be great to know how this all came to pass. What, did the province go to Barrow AFC? Did Barrow AFC come to us? Who are the personalities involved that may indeed have brokered this relationship? We do know that there's people opining that because Barrow has a relatively substantial offshore wind farm, that there might be some relation there. And then, of course, even Minister Byrne referring to someone named Tony. And that Tony, I think, is probably Tony Shearer, who owns 40% of the team. Tony also has an overlap with some business being done in this province. Tony Shearer was an executive with the Compass Group for years, so it'd be nice to know exactly what went on there. And I know that's not massive money, it's just curious money. Anyway, you want to take it on? Let's go. And a handful of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians participating in the Ball Hockey World Championships at the U16 and U18 ranks, both won gold. Absolutely amazing stuff. On the U16 front, I've got some names. I'm still trying to nail down all the U18 guys from this province. But so we had, the captain was Jordan Flynn, Zachary Earl was on the team, Brandon Philpott was on the team. Late in the third period, in the final against undefeated home team Slovakia, the captain Jordan Flynn from this province tied it up at 5. We go on to win in overtime, and I'll get the names from the U18s ASAP. All right, so just like that, no Canadians left on the single side at Wimbledon, but it was on this date in 1984, John McEnroe defended his crown when he absolutely thrashed fellow American Jimmy Connors, 6-1, 6-1, 6-2. And on this date on the women's side, 1995, Steffi Graf, superstar, beat Arantxa Sanchez Vicario of Spain in 3 sets, 7-5 in the third, to win her 6th Wimbledon title. Let's keep going. Stick with sports and recreation. So an announcement last week that I'm not surprised with any of this, to be honest with you. We've heard former boss at the Hockey NL, Jack Lee, and some of his partners, including one Professor Tom Clift, have long been talking about having an ice rink out in Galway, and it's happening. So, again, not entirely sure how this all came to pass, but it's certainly an economic boom for Galway. That's for bloody well sure. So apparently the developer, of course, former Premier Danny Williams, he donated a 10-acre plot, so they're going to build an ice rink. There's going to be some curling sheets involved. I'm not sure what else will be involved in this multiplex. So it was always quite likely, and the rumbles have been going around for years, that this would indeed happen. But now, with partnership with the province, it will indeed be out in Galway. Good news for Danny Williams. He says it will be good news for the rest of the province. But of course, when we are looking for that amount of land with adequate parking, what have you, they chose Galway. Your thoughts? You're welcome to share them on the programme this morning. Okay, dealing with other political issues. So as of last Friday, it was the end of 28 years in public office for Tom Osborne. Served in both parties, of course the Tories and the Liberals. Some contentious and controversial files, to say the least. And so Mr. Osborne's career has come to a close. We wish him good luck in the future. So who takes on the ministerial role of health and community services? You wonder how many people would probably turn down that role. Because when we look around at some of the woes people are talking about, whether you factor in cost of living, inflation, employment, and what have you, a lot of concerns throughout the entirety of the province and the country regarding the delivery of healthcare. So who knows who's going to be tapped to be the interim minister? People are whispering in my ear that it might be a return of John Haggie. Remains to be seen. Of course, he's working in municipal affairs these days. But who's going to be the next Minister of Health and Community Services? It will get the interim tag. This lends itself, of course, to the next obvious questions about whether or not there will be a by-election in Waterford Valley, or whether or not that seat would be left to be decided in a general election. You have to imagine that both on the federal and provincial front, while all the rumbles and rumours, and the conversations are taking place about when the elections will be, likely next year. I'm just guessing now because I don't have any inside baseball information, but who's going to be tapped to be the next Minister of Health in the province? We'll find out today, apparently, and anything inside that particular arena, we're happy to take on. And in the world of healthcare, interesting story coming from QB. And this is about some of the support workers that have not been recognised in the recent past, unlike the Registered Nurses Union and the Allied Health Professionals and the new blended capitation pay model for the province's doctors. But support workers like cleaners and people doing the laundry, what have you, they feel like they've been left behind. Because when you are in hospital, of course, you will deal with and relying on doctors and nurses. Of course you will be. But of course, some of the unseen and the folks who are doing their work, and hopefully diligently, to keep the place clean and to keep people fed, they have not indeed seen the same type of approach by the province. Now, the province has said from a spokesperson for the Treasury Board that they recognise the importance of these support workers, but they haven't seen the type of approach and adjustment in pay and all that conversation about work-life balance like we've seen in other parts of healthcare. Okay, let's keep going here. And in the world of jobs, Friday's announcement from Stats Canada talking about the Canadian economy, which is pretty much stagnant. There is an uptick in unemployment. Apparently, the economy shed some 1,400 jobs last month, and the unemployment ticks up 0.2 percentage points to 6.4%. So it's always really difficult inside these labour force surveys to dig down deep because we don't always get labour participation numbers. How many people have just even stopped looking for work? So apparently they're opining that there's 1.4 million people unemployed in June. Those who were unemployed in May, 1/5 became employed by June. Now it's a variety of sectors. So fewer people working in transportation, housing and public administration. Jobs were added, which is pretty much a seasonal issue regarding food services, the accommodation sector, the agriculture sector. Wages are up. Not mine, but I hear these numbers all the time. So our average hourly wages rose 5.4% in June compared to the same time last year. It was 5.1% in May. Where it becomes extremely difficult is for the country's youth. And I hear it in this province too. I don't have any access to job bank numbers, and nor do I really know where to point people. But youth across the country are having a wicked hard time to find a summer job before they go back to their studies in September. So the employment rate among students, those trying to find a summer job before returning to school full-time, fell to 46.8%. That's the lowest rate since June of 1998. Last year there was 53.7% high reported in June of 2022. Pardon me, not last year, 2022. Unemployment rate was 15.9% for returning students, marking an increase of 3.8 percentage points from a year earlier. So last year there was a big run on jobs in, for instance, restaurants, bars, airport services, what have you. Now those jobs have been taken, and many people have taken them as a full-time measure. So for youth across the country, and you see it if you peruse Facebook or other social media platforms here, moms and dads and youth themselves reaching out to the entire community. Do you know where I can get a job? And we all know it's becoming less affordable to be a student. We all face similar issues. But of course, when you only have so many months in the course of a year to actually work and try to put a few bucks in the bank, then if you can't find a summer job, going back to school is going to be extremely tricky. So unemployment numbers up 0.2% on the large scale or the broad strokes. And for youth, obviously a terrible situation when it's the highest rate, or pardon me, the lowest labour participation rate since June of 1998. Amazing stuff. All right, let's keep going. All right. So green is all the rage, eh? Now, there's nothing 100% green. There are things that are greener than other sources of energy. But now the Port of Corner Brook is getting in on the action as well, apparently. So just early stages. The Corner Brook Port Corporation signed an MOU with an outfit called CWP Global, looking at a green hydrogen project for the city. Now, a lot of unknowns here, of course, because once again, extremely early days. So they're looking at a potential for a project called Project Gwynia. So it would include a hot briquette iron plant at the port. So what this is going to be about, as opposed to the export of green hydrogen via ammonia for export, they're talking about using they're going to process iron ore into high quality, quote unquote, green iron using green hydrogen. And of course, here's a quote from the port itself. They believe such a project would elevate the region's international profile with the goal of becoming a symbol for the green transition of heavy industry. It would, of course, the project would be contingent upon its ability to meet rigorous environmental, social, and economic responsibilities. Of course, any growth in industry will indeed add jobs and expand the tax base, but what's kind of missing here is how are they going to generate the green hydrogen? Is it proposed wind farms like we're talking elsewhere? Not really sure, but the Port of Corner Brook wants to get in on the green hydrogen action, of course, and that's an issue that is important to you. We can take it on. Okay. Heard this story in the VOCM newscast as well, and not being very well received by folks involved with the civil liberties and or the national body representing university students, but the pro-Palestinian, as they call it, pro-Palestinian protest at the Arts and Admin building at Memorial University was disbanded on Friday night. So what the university has said is that there was a health inspection, and they said that the result of that inspection was that unsafe conditions. Munsu has been trying to get a look at the inspection report, and they're unable to at this moment in time. So it would be nice to see that report, because if there are legitimate, valid health concerns and safety concerns associated with the protest, that's one thing. If it was simply a decision taken that says it is not the appropriate place for this type of protest that was going on for, my understanding, was some 28 days, but that decision has been made. It's not the only protest of its kind in the country that has been disbanded in the recent past. They were able to get a court injunction at the University of Toronto to shut it down. We've seen the stories coming from McGill, from Western. So regardless of what side you're on this front, if you have any thoughts to offer, but as a result of this, apparently some of the protesters were unwilling to leave, eventually did, without incident, but 3 students have been charged with petty trespassing. They're going to be appearing in court at a later date. But that story is one that's taking place in many pockets right across the country. So there you go. All right, a couple of quickies before we get to you. See Tony Wakeham speaking out about some of the things his party might do if they're successful in whenever the next general election would be, like indexing the seniors' benefit for starters, then talk about things that the PCs have been really all over for quite a long time, and that's the sugar tax and a variety of other measures to put money back in your pocket. In addition to that, asking, just like Premier Fury and others, the union and many other voices around the province, talking about the decision taken on Northern Cod. Now, I know we've talked a lot about it, but it's a big one. And if that's something that's of interest to you, because I hear from the fish harvesters, mostly via email, that they are completely and utterly displeased with this. I'll use that very light word, displeased, because they've used some other more colourful language to describe it. But if that's of interest, let's go. A couple of quickies before we get to you. So the Prime Minister is off to Washington today to participate in the NATO summit. In years past, it never really felt like a whole lot of people in the country were that concerned with military spending, military preparedness. When you would see the polls, military spending would be way down. But now it's way up. We know that we are woefully unprepared, and apparently across the different branches of the Royal Canadian Armed Forces, we're about 58% prepared. Then there's we're short some 16,000 members of the Armed Forces, and so different levels of preparedness, of course, across the gamut of the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, what have you. But the Prime Minister, when you hear some of the headlines, you read some of the headlines, and you don't know how dire or drastic any of this relationship would be between Canada and our allies involved with NATO. It looks like 23 of the 32 NATO members are expected this year to hit the minimum target of 2% of the gross national products to be spent on defence. there's going to be a lot of behind-door meetings. Generally speaking, there's not a whole lot of names dropped and or people being taken to task in public fashion. It's a thought about the possibility for diplomatic isolation. But, of course, we're not alone. We're not the only country that doesn't have the target of 2% of GDP hit on defense spending. So there's a lot of concerns there. And interestingly enough, it was on this date in 1997 that Czech Republic, Hungary, and Poland were offered an invitation to join the alliance, which eventually happened in 1999. Poland's of importance here because we talk about the issues regarding Article 5 and NATO and the geographical proximity of Poland to the conflict in Ukraine. So interesting stuff. On that front, when we talk about military spending, and if that's important, it's really truly remarkable to me that for most of my time in this chair or in the media, military spending did not get a lot of attention. Now, absolutely, we've talked about the dearth of supports available to the country's veterans and the paper warfare they have to entertain to be able to avail of the supports, and we're failing them miserably. But on defence spending, just a reminder, there has been some recent defence spending announced in the most recent budget. So what they're talking about is new equipment, including airborne early warning aircraft, the AWACS. They're currently being used over Poland and Romania to monitor the situation in Ukraine at this moment in time. Talking about some long-range surface-to-surface missiles for the Army, utility helicopters. They may or may not be drones or operated by human beings. And some of the numbers are $8.1 billion in new defense spending over the next 5 years, a commitment to an additional $73 billion in defense spending over the next 2 decades. That brings us from where we are now at about 1.29% of GDP up to 1.76% of GDP by 2030. May not satisfy, apparently, some of our NATO allies. And, of course, we can take it on if you're so inclined. A little bit of a brighter note before we get to the phone. So we had a caller last week ask me if I'd heard some of the results at the Nationals regarding darts, and I hadn't. And so he filled me in on a couple of fronts, but I got an email that's pretty all-inclusive of what happened. Apparently, okay, the darts that took place in Quebec, the men from the province took home gold in the Nord Cup, and the ladies took home the bronze. Team Canada took gold, winning the Canada Cup for the first time in 24 years. We had 18 players who represented the province. On the men's side, gold Nord Cup champions: Roger Reeves, Nelson Tobin, Frank Dominics, Clyde Spracklin, Darren Mercer, Brian Mercer, who's a nephew to Darren Mercer, Kerry Bungie, Dewey Lowell, and the alternate was Wayne Kelly. Congratulations. On the ladies' side, Kira Taylor, Crystal Cheeseman, Krista Kelly Cox, who's the daughter of Wayne Kelly, Melissa Mercer, who's the wife of Brian Mercer, Eileen Pierce, Lindsay Rose, Alton Mador, Sandra Squires, and the alternate was Kerry Lynn Brake. Congratulations to all hands. We're on Twitter. We're at VOCM Openline. Follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, let's have a great show. That means you're in the queue to talk about whatever's on your mind. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Apparently, the Cornerbrook MOU with CWP Global, they intend on building 5, I'll make sure I get the right reference here, they intend on building 5 gigawatts of wind out in that particular area. And also, very quickly, before we get to you, I was asking for some names, I'm trying to secure the names of the Newfoundlanders Labradorians on the U18 Team Canada ball hockey team. Congratulations, Jack Barrington, Carter Arnold, Andy Knight, Kyle Green, Kyle Tucker, and Liam Noble. The assistant coach was also from here, Jack Keogh and Mike Dyke. And on the U16 team, the assistant captain was Mitch Bragg. So appreciate that, Trevor, for sending that along. Let's begin this morning on line number 1. Good morning, Lois. You're on the air.
Good morning. How are you, Patty?
I'm doing okay, thanks. How about you?
Not great.
What's going on?
Well, myself and my husband, we own a property here in St. John's, and we hand-delivered a 3-month notice to vacate the premises to our tenants back on the end of March, which was effective on June 30th, and they are still there, have no intention of getting out. The power has been cut off several times over the past few years, failure to pay. We were able to get into the premises on Tuesday to have a look around. We were told at that time that there was several spots in the roof that were leaking. We were never told this before. So, of course, this probably has been going on for several months, and now, of course, the leaks have caused more damage to the ceiling, walls, and floor. It's uninhabitable. There's mice droppings in the basement. They've been smoking there, even though they're not supposed to be smoking. So it's a thorough cleaning, paint job, water damage. I said we don't know how much. The roof was replaced 5 years ago, but the ceiling was probably going to have to be torn down. We have another tenant was supposed to be in, of course, on July 1st. She's given notice to where she was, so now she's currently living out of a cargo trailer. We went to the RNC. They couldn't do anything. We went to the landlord's tenants, filled out all the forms. We went the proper channels, didn't threaten them or anything like that. They threatened us with taking an axe to the house. We thought maybe the RNC could even just knock on the door and speak to them, but they're not allowed to do that. This is our only source of income, where this is basically, we don't know what else to do. We're hoping that you're going to have some advice or something that can help us out. I have no idea what our next step is. It seems like the tenants have a lot more rights than we do, and so we've followed the correct procedures, but we're at a standstill now, and this is 5 days. They haven't paid any rent since June the 30th, so we've offered, we actually paid for a storage unit for them, U-Haul to move their stuff. They packed up some things. We've gone back every day since. They've given us every excuse in the book that they can't do this, or they don't have time to do this, they don't want us touching their stuff. What do we do?
Good question. First, why are you evicting them?
They failure to pay their rent on time. We really don't need a reason, apparently, but they're not good tenants. The place is always dirty. We've never had any issues before. We've had the property for over 20 years, never had any issue. Everybody always paid their rent on time. Having the power cut off 3 or 4 times. We have security cameras there because we were a security business years ago. That was also cut off. We don't know if they cut it off intentionally. So we have no cameras, no exterior, no interior, no exterior cameras because we have it's a large property and we have a garage there as well that we own ourselves.
Can you apply for an eviction hearing at the Residential Tenancy Board, and that secures you an eviction notice, which can indeed involve police?
Well, we physically went into the landlord tenants, and they recommended that. This could take up to 3 months. We've got the tenant ready to move in, has nowhere to live. Like, she's just kind of at a standstill. The lady that she's renting from, the other tenant, she's moving out, selling her house, and she's moving to China on Thursday. So she's between a rock and a hard place herself.
It sounds like it. I mean, I guess obviously the next steps, if they refuse to leave, is to initiate an actual legal proceeding. Yes,
yeah.
And so have you ventured down that road versus...
Okay. I'm sorry?
No, have you ventured down that road, or are you simply...
We haven't yet. We're trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. We're not calling them liars. We don't want to do that, but... our own property where we live is not that far from the rental, which is good. We've gone back and forth 2 or 3 times every day to speak to them. Most times they'll answer the phone or the door. Every excuse. They just stand there and say, oh, we can't do this, or we couldn't get, oh, yes, the truck was coming, and then 2 hours later, oh, no, the person can't come with the truck. So we've paid for a month for a storage unit for them. We paid for that day for the U-Haul. Everything, oh, yes, we're getting out. We have an actual letter saying that, yes, at 11:59 on July 1st, they were going to be out of there. And this is now, July 8th, and they're still there. And now they're not answering their phone at all, so...
Yeah, there's always a lot of focus on so-called bad landlords, but make no mistake, there's bad tenants out there as well.
Yeah. And this is to say we've been landlords for over 20 years and have never had an issue like this. Never had an issue. A couple of times you might have someone that is a day late on the rent, and they call and they apologize for being a day late. It's awful, and the property is ruined. The floor is ruined with the water damage. We have hardwood floor in there that's all black. Just the odor itself when they open the door just overtake you. It was just horrible.
So, unfortunately, other than going down the legal proceeding road, I don't know what else we can do. Really,
yeah.
Because if you have an eviction,
he's in dire straits. He's having chest pains, and for our mental and our physical health, this is not a good thing. Not a good thing. And we had no idea that this would be as bad as it is. And we were also told initially when we rented the place that one person was renting it, but that person sublet it to these people and put up a wall in our basement Initially, they asked us, and we said no, we're not. Just not putting an additional wall, but the wall was put up, and someone else was living in the basement. There's not even a shower or anything down there. There's a small toilet and sink. It's not meant to be an apartment, and that person has been living there for the last year or so, I guess. So we didn't know anything about that until after the fact.
It's lawyers next. That's it. I mean, there's, residential tenancy boards can indeed have an eviction hearing, but that doesn't bring you a whole lot further down the road.
And it's the timeline is the biggest thing for us.
Right.
They couldn't give us any timeline. They couldn't tell us when or if or how or any of that,
Now, I'm not going to suggest this is something that you should or that I would do, but we've seen some other examples where the landlord, upon trying to entertain a problematic tenant and eviction notice, and the proper process has been followed. Sometimes it's not followed, but in this case, it sounds like it has been.
We've gone, we've gone and looked online to make sure that we're following the proper procedures. We don't want to get arrested, so we want to make sure that everything is above board and all the paperwork has been filled out properly. And we can't physically go in, obviously, and take them body and bones and move them out, but I don't know what else to do. I mean, we'd have to go to a lawyer, I guess. That's probably the best thing, Patty, or? I
think that's the only recourse available at this stage, Lois.
Okay.
We've seen some landlords, they'll actually physically go in and not take the tenants maybe the bag of bones and remove them physically, but take everything out of the house. I mean, that's pretty aggressive stuff. And it might...
we tried. We offered our help. We have a truck ourselves. We offered our help to, help even just to move some of the smaller things. I've got friends that will help. Not a problem. And will not damage anything. I mean, these people are they care about their items that they have, obviously, our tenants. So we're not going to send someone in just to fire it out on the street. I mean, just someone to remove it and store it and keep it for them until they can get it themselves, I guess, but nothing, no, not coming in, not touching our things. So I don't know. I'm just,
Yeah, it's down to the lawyers now.
Yeah, it's an awful, awful situation that we've never had to deal with, and this has gone on for a week now. This is last Friday, I guess, last Saturday, that we first spoke to them.
Keep me in the loop. I know it's not necessarily what you wanted to hear, but
I know.
Other than an interaction that I don't think either side wants to entertain, maybe we'll leave it to the courts. You get a formal eviction notice, and then off you go.
I appreciate all your information, and I will take that into consideration for sure. Thank you for talking to me.
My pleasure. Good luck, Lois.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right, let's try to take the breaks on time here to get the week going. So we did indeed speak with Make-A-Wish Foundation last week here on the program, and now 16 members, 16 part of the crew of the HMCS St. John's are here on the Rock, running the Rock, trying to raise some money and awareness for Make-A-Wish Foundation. Last year they exceeded, I think it was $132,000, which is a record. That helps them. Well, it's about an average of $10,000 per wish. Ryan Doucette, I imagine, is one of the runners. He's on the line number 3 to join us right after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Ryan Doucette. You're on the air.
How you doing, Patty?
Doing okay. How about you?
Doing good. A couple days off my last run, so I'm getting away from the sore, but this has been a pretty amazing experience so far. We've been 3 days running, 4 days fundraising in Newfoundland, and the Newfoundlanders have really come out this year and helped us. We've set fundraising records in every stop so far, and we want to keep that rolling.
Well, hopefully you can exceed last year's total, which I think was $132,000, or an all-time high. So, Ryan, tell us about yourself. You're a member of the HMCS St. John's?
Yes, I'm an able communicator on board. I'm from Halifax originally. I've got family here in Newfoundland. My wife is from Carbonear, and I've spent 6 years posted in St. John's myself, actually. So the province is pretty near and dear to my heart, and this is this charity that we've been participating in this year is pretty special one.
Make-A-Wish is absolutely a special one for kids with dire health prognosis and their families to be able to do something fun together, whether it be a trip to Disney or go to a wrestling event or go to a NASCAR race, whatever it is they choose. I mean, the stories that we hear coming back, it's one of the last great family adventures full of fun and smiles that they may ever share. So what you're doing is critically important. So inside this relay format that you're trying to do, to run, I think, some 900 kilometres across the island, what kind of training did you do, Ryan? Are you always fit and a runner to begin with?
Myself, I'm not much of a runner, to be honest, but we did some team runs in that before we came and got prepped for this. And we have some long-distance runners on the team, and we have some not-so-long-distance runners, but we all put in our max effort, and we're pushing our way across the island. We have a team out right now running from Corner Brook to Deer Lake. We have some fundraising teams out with here in Deer Lake at North Atlantic in the Big Stop. We have one in Humber Valley right now at the North Atlantic, and we have one at Market Square in Corner Brook. So we'd like to see some people come out and help us reach our goals.
Ryan, how does it all unfold when we're trying to come up with a team of 16? Do people just put their name forward? Are you actively recruited? How does that work?
So we start out a few months before the run asking for volunteers, and we always get more than we require. So the team gets whittled down. We lose some members due to postings and taskings, but we never have problems filling the holes because it's something that everybody in the crew wants to participate in. Which they do. Prior to coming, we set a fundraising record for the ship. We raised just over $14,000 as a ship before we came, and pretty much everybody on board came out and helped with that.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. I think it's a really cool event, and of course probably good for members of the crew to be involved in something like this on the public stage, fundraising, awareness for Make-A-Wish. How does it feel amongst the crew, and what kind of reaction do you get from your fellow crew members who aren't involved?
Everyone supports us back home. The crew that are running, this has been really special. We meet a lot of amazing people. We actually had the opportunity in Stephenville 2 days ago to grant a wish. We gave a little girl her Rory. She's going to the San Diego Zoo to see some tigers. It gets pretty emotional on the run of it, but, it's definitely good emotions.
Absolutely. Very positive stuff. So are you hitting the road today yourself? Are you running?
No, I'm a part of a fundraising crew today. I'm on the road tomorrow running from Deer Lake up to Woody Point.
What's the fundraising crew doing today?
We're just out making some noise, getting some attention, and we're hoping to raise more money and reach our goal to break the record again this year.
Well, let's see if this kind of exposure here on the program and aid in doing exactly that. So appreciate your time this morning, Ryan. Say hello to the rest of the crew and good luck.
Absolutely. One last thing, if anybody wants to support us online, if you Google Run the Rock NL, our Make-A-Wish page is sponsored there, and you can donate there as well.
Good man. Appreciate this.
All right, thanks, Patty.
You're welcome, Ryan. You too, buddy. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
I don't know if I got to this story off the top. I certainly meant to. And it is big news because we knew last week that there was agreement that was struck in Supreme Court about the compensation package coming to the victims of Mount Cashel. And this story is as old as 1987 when the initial legal proceedings began and the charges were laid. So a third-party independent arbiter has come, well, I guess they're called an insolvency monitor, has come forward now and announced the compensation that will be afforded to these victims. So some 367 claims were filed. 292 have been accepted at this point. There's 65 were disallowed and 10 are considered pending. So the independent or third-party insolvency monitor came forward and said that the sum of $104 million to be paid to the victims of sexual abuse by Newfoundland and Labrador clerics. We all know these stories. And so it looks like the average payment to a claimant is going to be $356,417. Here's where there's a big gap in the whole issue. And hopefully that money flows sooner than later. And it may satisfy some of the victims. Many may remain unsatisfied, and nothing can repair or repay the damage done to them emotionally, physically, and mentally at the hands of the abusers. But the Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation, of course, we know that they were insolvent and they went to sell off a bunch of the properties, churches and or other associated church properties. They raised some $40 million. Including in the $40 million is $13 million paid by the province to buy schools, which I didn't even think was going to be necessary. Inside the School Act, I'm pretty sure it read that if the building was used as a school, then the province would be able to retain ownership and operations. But, of course, it didn't happen, and the province paid $13 million. But there's a pretty big gap between the 40 that's been raised and the 104 that's going to be paid out. So the province is being taking the task on this front anyway, right? So there's lots of lawsuits in front of the provincial government. And so here's one of the paragraphs that leads to this a little clearer. The Mount Cashel scandal exploded in 1989 and included reports of how a 1975 police investigation was quashed by the Provincial Justice Department. The Hughes inquiry ordered the province of Newfoundland and Labrador's government. They found numerous failings in the child protection system. So that's the Hughes inquiry implication. Then we go on to the Winter Commission, established by the Archdiocese of St. John's, detailing how church officials would frequently transfer priests accused of sexually abusing children to other parishes. That also included people who were convicted of abusing children here in this province, just to pop up on the radar and do the exact same thing, for instance, in the province of British Columbia. And those stories are fairly recent. So inside the gap between $40 million and $104 million, there was some vague reference to the fact that there might be some insurance policies in place to cover that particular gap. But when you kind of read between the lines, it's starting to look more and more like, given some of the rulings at the Hughes Commission or the Hughes inquiry, that the province might be on the hook for the other outstanding $64 million-ish. That, they've made reference to insurance policies, no clear understanding of exactly what those insurance policies would entail. But the compensation package has now been decided. And once again, we hear from Jeff Budden, who represents over 200 of these claimants. And he does make reference to the fact that some may remain unsatisfied by this particular ruling and this compensation dollar. So an average payment to the claimants of $356,417. We're glad that this has now finally reached its legal end. And, of course, once again, the money will be welcomed, of course. But for some of the victims who we've heard their personal stories with their names omitted, the impact that it's had on their life has been immeasurable. And there's no cash amount that can cover the damage that has been done necessarily. That's the story that we wanted to get to today because, of course, critically important. Sticking with some rulings, and this one's pretty interesting because we've been talking about the province looking at ankle monitors for people accused of intimate partner violence or domestic abuse. And then the reverse onus that Minister Hogan has been talking about. And then there was a sign-off by Minister of Justice John Hogan just last week to see the man accused of killing the mother of his 5 children some 4 months ago, a Syrian immigrant, been here for some 10 years. And so now his murder 1 case is going directly to court. There will be no need for preliminary inquiry. So that requires the sign-off of the Attorney General and the Minister of Justice, and that happened last week. They call it a direct indictment. So when you look at the Public Prosecution Service of Canada, they refer to a couple of very specific issues that can lead to a direct indictment. They talk about witnesses being threatened or in poor health, the prosecution resources being unreasonably strained by a preliminary inquiry, or the violation of accused right to have their case heard within a reasonable amount of time due to a delay linked to the preliminary inquiry. Doesn't look or sound like any of those were what triggered this particular direct indictment. And yes, the concept and the issue, which is a social scourge, and it plagues communities right across the country, plagues provinces right across the country, is what we see in the spike of issues and instances of intimate partner violence. So I do think it makes all the sense in the world to have the ankle monitors in place. And, protective orders are sometimes not worth the paper they're printed on. If someone is willing to hurt, harm, or in this particular case, kill their partner, then to know where they are and what proximity they may be to where their partner lives or works can very likely be quite helpful on this front. All right, let's check in on the Twitter before we get a break and come back and speak with you. We're VOCM Openline. You know what to do. You can follow us there. Email address is openline@vocm.com. When we come back, we're going to be talking about Northern Cod with David Vardy, who just wrote not only about Northern Cod, but has written about some of the most recent numbers brought forward by Newfoundland and Labrador Hydro. That's David Vardy right after this. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program. Well, where were you on the 2nd of July 1992? David Vardy was at that point the province's Deputy Minister of Fisheries, and he joins us on line number 1. Good morning, David. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you.
Before we get into some of the comments that you made in the Uncle Gnarly blog regarding hydro, let's dig into Northern Cod. So, as you point out, I read an email that's from you. The stock has not grown since 2016. Dr. George Rose has said, yes, maybe the Northern Cod has returned to its historical migrating patterns, but people are pointing to just simply DFO's change of the model from the data point in 1983 to 1954, moving it from critical to cautious, but saying the quiet part out loud doesn't mean there's any more fish in the water. Your thoughts not only about the politics of it and the technicals regarding stewardship versus commercial fishery, but even just the stock itself. What did you make of this decision?
Well, I was quite shocked with the decision, Paddy, because historically, you go back. When I was Deputy Minister of Fisheries back in the 90s, it was 1992, leading the years, a couple of years leading up to 1992, the reference point was 1.2 million metric tons of spawning biomass. Okay, that was what was established by NAFO as a requirement for a healthy fishery. And so then, of course, we went a long ways away from that. And when the fishery was closed, I remember Jim Wellman made the comment that there's enough fish left now to fill a hockey arena up to the top of the rails, okay? There's 20,000 tons. We went from 1.2 million metric tons down to 20,000 metric tons. Now we're up somewhere in the 300,000 ton range. Is still very questionable, but as you say, they're changing the goalpost because it was said some years ago that we needed to get up to 800,000 tons before we could open the fishery, a commercial fishery. Now we're back up into the 300s, and that seems to be good enough. Well, that kind of a fundamental change in the limit reference point seems to be too much. It's not really credible, and it seems to me you got to look at a whole bunch of indicators of what's going on out there in the ecosystem, not the least of which is water temperature, which is rising, which is not good for cod. You got the problems with seals. That problem is not abated. And we got more predators, and the other thing is we have less prey for the cod because the capelin are not in very good shape, and so very few of the indicators are positive. So it seems to me that this is a big decision. It requires a lot of thought. It requires a lot of input, a lot of assessment, and it's a sort of a fundamental decision on the future of the province. It's a kind of decision that requires a public review, similar to what Les Harris undertook when he did his task force on northern cod, and similar to some of the comments that Richard LeBlanc made with regard to Muskrat Falls about major public policy decisions needing to have some kind of a major public review. So that's why I think we are on northern cod. I think it's premature. I think we need to, there needs to be a process in place. And another thing that's not working properly is the governance. The governance model here, is not working well. There's very little communications going on between the two levels of government. And one of the things I wrote in my letter to the MHAs, or the MPs, to the MPs and senators, and the two ministers of fisheries and the premier, was to point out that the joint management proposal has been on the go for a long time. There's probably 15 or more reports recommending joint management by eminent people, eminent authorities, and there are a number of people who studied the fishery over the years. Only one of those studies, one of those reports was a federal report coming out of DFO, and it goes back to John Crosby's time, and not too many people will remember that, but John Crosby had a model for joint management as well. It didn't go over well at the time because he was proposing a model based on the Atlantic region as opposed to a provincial model. But at least it opened the door, and it indicated that with John Crosby, he was prepared to talk about it, but it never got very far, and so there's been an up and down type of thing, and there's been back in Roger Grimes' time there was a piece of legislation that may have been introduced into the House of Assembly, and there was a fairly detailed white paper on it, but it hasn't gotten very far. It needs political support. So there's lots of professional, bureaucratic backup to put something in place. What's now needed is the political will. And, of course, we all know that all the provinces are going to look at this because this is going to require a constitutional amendment. It's going to require a constitutional amendment, and there's going to need to be support from other provinces. And they're going to simply say, well, we want something too. And there's no reason why there couldn't be a joint management regime for other provinces if they want it. But the thing is that for northern cod affects us more than anybody else because it's a fishery that we brought into Confederation. It's the basis upon which this place was settled on the northeast coast, and it is part of a whole chain of stocks of fish that surround the province of Newfoundland and Labrador and gave us our lifeblood back at the beginning. So I think this is premature. I hope that the government of Canada and the minister reconsider what they've done here. Why they've done this, I don't know. Why they would choose this particular time to do it is sort of baffling. And I think that the Northern Cod moratorium of 1992, July the 2nd, 1992, was imposed in haste. And we only learned about it in the Department of Fisheries and the Provincial Department of Fisheries within a matter of hours before the event took place and the announcement downtown. But but there's no excuse to spring this on us at this point in time. We've had 32 years to prepare for the reopening of the northern cod fishery, and I think it's premature.
Yeah, well, many would suggest that the announcement of the moratorium in 1992 was years too late, is one point. And of course, we're talking about a fairly meagre increase in the total allowable catch from 13,000 tonnes to 18,000 tonnes. So when you make reference to consultations, because apparently, like you said, 1992 was a surprise, all sides, processors, harvesters alike, have said that maybe the exploitation rate is really low and we can handle this type of increase. They were actually asking for as much as 25,000 metric tons this go around. But in the world of joint management, I'll never forget it. I was interviewing then Federal Cabinet Minister Loyola Hearn, who told me in the interview that we already have custodial management of that resource. And of course, nothing could be further than the truth. Just look at this announcement. There was very little to no consultation, and all of a sudden, they just plucked a number out of thin air and announced that we were going to move to a commercial fishery. The implication there, I think, is important, because with the strict regulations in place for the stewardship fishery, it's very different now when we open it up to the offshore and the type of gear. Now, Kerry Bunnell from Ocean Choice was on the show last week talking about that they have all the attention to how the gear is used and try to minimize the negative impact on the sea floor and the issue of bycatch and premature catch of juvenile fish and what have you. But that issue of joint management, is that something that's even a manageable beast? And if so, how would that actually look?
Well, I just want to comment on what you said about the small increase. It is a relatively small increase we're talking about here, but the problem is that the stock hasn't increased for the last since 2016. And so, I mean, without positive signs of recruitment into the fishery that give you the sense that it is robust, I think that's very dangerous. And then, as you say as well, the fact that when crossing that threshold into a commercial fishery allows for the NAFO members to come back in, and so they're going to get an automatic 5%. But they won't stay at 5%, because once you get NAFO vessels fishing in there, you know how NAFO has worked over the years. It hasn't worked very well. It's been in place since 1949, and there's still this objection procedure whereby individual nation states can declare their own quota, and so if they don't like the quota, they'll establish their own quota. And the whole enforcement regime is all based upon observers that are not really law enforcement agents. They're there on the vessels at the sufferance of the captain, and so not a very good system. But getting back to the joint management thing, well, we did it on oil and gas, and so why can't we do it in this one as well? Is not. I mean, I'm not going to say there's not different. There are differences between oil and gas. The deposits of oil and gas don't move around. Fish do. Fish are moving constantly, moving in. They don't respect zones. They move back and forth across the 200-mile line. All those kinds of things. But there's a political process that has to take place, and what Premier Peckford did back with the offshore was he negotiated an agreement with Prime Minister Mulroney before Mulroney became the Prime Minister of Canada in 1984. So that started before Mulroney became Prime Minister, and before Pat Carney became the Minister of Natural Resources or Energy or whatever it was called at the time. And so there was a negotiating process, and very well organized, and a lot of work and a lot of political will on both sides. And Nova Scotia came out of it with an offshore petroleum board as well. And and they were happy, and Newfoundland and Labrador was happy. Now, there's been some erosion, probably substantial erosion with the offshore board, and there's vigilance required there. But what I'm saying is it's not impossible. It's not mission impossible. It is difficult. There's no cakewalk here, but I think it's something that can be put together. So I think that it's with good intentions, this can be done. And one of the key things that needs to be kept in mind here is that most of the proposals for joint management would call for a different approach to science, a more independent approach for science. And you're going to remember Gus Etchegary now, who died a little over a year ago, because one of the major things that Gus kept talking about is the importance of independent science, taking science out from under the thumb of the political system. Because we used to have the Fisheries Research Board here. When we entered into Confederation, we had a Fisheries Research Board, and we had a man who was in charge there by the name of Dr. Wilford Templeton, and the people of Newfoundland and Labrador respected that man. They respected his judgment. He had other scientists working with him, but he was independent. He could release reports without having them vetted by the minister or the deputy minister in the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. You go to Iceland, you'll see the same thing. You'll see an independent fisheries research institute, and that's what we need in Newfoundland and Labrador. We need a very strong scientific research institute where the politics are kept out of it, where the findings of the scientists are made public without going through some kind of a political vetting process, where the evidence that comes from the science is not impaired or tarnished or tainted in any way, shape, or form. And that is critically important. So joint management in the fishery, without doing something to restore the independence of fisheries research, would be unsuccessful. That's an important part of the equation to make this work. But I think it's doable, and I haven't seen a report yet that said that this is a mission impossible. There've been, as I said, the 14, 15, perhaps more. I haven't been able to put all of the different reports together, but I've been compiling them. And I remember doing a report with Eric Dunn back for the Royal Commission on renewing and strengthening our place in Confederation back 20 years ago. And you know, we did a lot of research on this at the time, and certainly we can improve the governance framework. So the governance is part of this. The science is another. And it's important to have that fish harvesters play an important role in this as well. So I think that this is a very complex thing. You're not going to put it together overnight, but I think that we have the time to do it. So Canada is not under any particular pressure right now in 2024 to reopen that fishery, as far as I can tell. Why don't we take the time, get it right? In the meantime, put together the governance model, make sure that the public understand this, because this is a public resource. This is not a private resource. We haven't privatized the resource. It's a common property resource, and the public of Canada have a right to understand what's happening, and we are the province that brought those resources into Confederation. If Newfoundland and Labrador hadn't joined Canada, the vast amount of the continental shelf, with its rich mineral and fish resources, would still be would not belong to Canada. So there's a strong case here for Newfoundland and Labrador to get a seat at the table. And it's important to get this right. It's very complex. There's the cost of science. There's the surveillance, the enforcement, all these things. They cost a lot of money. The province of Newfoundland is not going to be able to pick up all that money. The lion's share of the cost is going to still have to be borne by the government of Canada. But the fact that the cost resides with the federal government and the responsibility under the Constitution Act, that there's no reason why they can't change. You know, we just are not stuck in the past. I think we have to find a better way for the future. And one thing that's very clear is that the management of the fishery has failed, because if you look at how productive our fishing resources were historically and where they are today, it's an abject failure. And I think that we've got to do something to restore it. And we should not simply be accepting the closure of all those stocks. I mean, think about Gus Etchegaray would talk about the redfish, the plaice, the American plaice, the yellowtail, all these species that straddle the 200-mile limit, and they haven't come back. They still haven't come back.
Not at all.
They're paper fish, but most people have written all that off. Why write it off? Why are we writing this off? This is a resource we brought into Canada. There's no reason why those resources can't be restored if we do it right.
Absolutely, David. I get, just one thing. When we call it a common shared resource, it's not exactly though, right? Because as opposed to just the expanded tax base with harvesters and processors and people working in the plants, what have you, but like oil, there's direct royalties flow to the government, which makes it more of a common shared resource as opposed to how we treat the fishery. But your ultimate message is we shouldn't be writing this off. We should be able to sift through the complexities and create a better custodial plan or process. David, as usual, I really appreciate your time. We're after the news break. Stay in touch.
It's good talking to you.
Thanks, David. Bye-bye. Here you go. There he was. He was the Deputy Minister of Fisheries, 2nd of July, 1992. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Good morning, Candice. You're on the air.
Hi, Paddy. Morning.
Good morning to you.
Just wanted to jump on here now. We are doing a rally for the home care workers at the Confederation Building. It started today, 9 o'clock this morning. There was 3 people that showed up so far as of 10 o'clock this morning. Becky Daly was down there. She was going to do a piece. But, of course, there was not enough people down there that showed up. So I just wanted to get word out. This is the biggest platform to try and get workers down there, clients, families, whoever wants to support us, get down to the Confederation Building.
So, of course, for just a friendly reminder, there was the group of 22, I think is what they call some 22 different negotiators were dealing with NAPE and the different owners to come up with a new contract. It was a pretty lowball offer, financially speaking. Then with the medical benefits, they're told that they would kick in after the course of about a year, versus for the early childhood educators, it looked like it was going to be about 3 months. So lots of issues at play here. For many of these people in the group of 22, they just went back to business as normal. But, of course, home care workers are really quite vocal on the fact that this contract offer that was rejected, I think 54% voted against the contract, is simply not good enough. So you say there have been very few people show up at this particular rally this morning?
Yeah, it was 3 people showed up this morning, and they posted on the group that we got going, and they said it's pretty shameful. And look, we understand that people are out there working, but I'm sure there's more than 3 people that's not working today.
Absolutely. Candice, just a quick question. There was one of the negotiators was suspended right away after the negotiations, or pardon me, the contract failed. So do we happen to understand the status of what's going on with that particular person?
I do, but I can't get into detail on that.
Okay.
I know people from the negotiation team, but I can't get into detail.
Because that's just atrocious. I mean, that's the epitome of bargaining in bad faith.
Oh, 100% that. But I do have to agree with the person that got removed. I do have to agree that they done good, and they've done good with doing that, because I didn't agree with some of the stuff as well.
Fair enough. So, folks, if you're one of the home care workers or a supporter of a home care worker, please do indeed make your way up to Confederation Building to participate in this particular protest today. Strength in numbers, as they say.
Oh, 100%. And Becky Daly did leave her phone number and said that if we get some more numbers, that she'll be back.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Candice.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Fraser Pickett. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy, and thank you for the opportunities to share with you and your listening audience about an upcoming event that's happening this week, Tuesday, at the Bruno Centre. For your listening audience across the island, we will be hosting multiple information sessions in collaboration with Memorial University, and also KEN, Academy Canada, the College of North Atlantic, and DITRAC out in Lewisport. Both of the events, one will be happening here, and it's about if a person has a spare bedroom in their home and they live close to a university or college campus, there's a desperate need for safe and secure and affordable housing for students across our province. Excuse me. The live event in person will be happening tomorrow evening at the Bruno Center at 7:30 p.m. And there will be 2 Zoom sessions, one at 12 noon on Wednesday, and the second will be at 7:30 p.m. that evening. So at least for individuals who are working during the 12 to 1 session, there's an opportunity for the 7:30 to 8:30 session. So we're very excited that we're hoping to have the very first host and student attending the event tomorrow evening, and hopefully maybe they could answer some questions of the audience, the people who will be in attendance, about the actual program of how we can supply and find safe homes for students, particularly in this upcoming semester.
Just talk about specifically how it's supposed to work. Like, what do people have to entertain if they want to be part of this Spaces Shared program?
Well, the big thing would be is if you go to spacesshared.ca, it's very straightforward. There's a button there if you want to be a host or if you're looking to become, if you're a student and you're looking for it. The way it works, the actual program will take you through numerous questions about who you are, what your likes, your dislikes, your background when it comes to from your educational point of view, or if you have a college degree, or if you have a technical degree from the College of North Atlantic or any of the colleges. It'll ask you all of those. It's almost like a personality type situation. And then the student will also list all of his or her or their likes, dislikes, etc., and then the analytics within the system will actually match those students. So if you have a person who's coming here to study education, automatically somewhere along the line they will be matched, hopefully, with a teacher who is retired or still working and has a spare bedroom in their home that they would love to share with a student, and then you have the benefits of both sides. One who is learning to become a student or a mechanic or whatever it might be, and joined with a person who understands what they are doing and what they're going through. And so there's lots of great benefits, but the process is once you go in through the process, it just simply guides you along the way.
The program that used to exist at Memorial University, so a student would get an opportunity for a subsidized rate, so to speak, in exchange for some household chores or some help around the house, whether that be taking out the garbage or fundamental things, maybe mow the lawn or whatever the case may be. But one concern that I immediately will hear every time we have these types of conversations is about safety. Now, I know that the student has to pass a criminal background check, and there's ongoing processes to ensure safety inside the home. Then, of course, they get to meet each other prior to entering into this home share arrangement, whether it be with video calls is probably the most common, so that you're not absolute strangers upon first moving into the home. So there's a benefit here to both sides. And, of course, I know Spaces Shared really do have a pretty keen focus on safety inside this particular process. So, and the support is there. I know that because I've had a good close look at this or some while back when we first started talking about it. Anything else you want people to know about it this morning, Fraser?
Well, the big thing is about that there's an opportunity. One, there's a real need. And second, there's an opportunity tomorrow evening at Tuesday to attend an in-person session that, again, hopefully we can answer any question that may come up from the audience. And the same thing on the virtual opportunity. Again, just simply sign on to that, and the questions and answers after the session will hopefully cover off any concerns that people have, because the important issue here, again, as we know, is that both parties will enter into an agreement whereby they are safe, secure, and also the affordability aspect of it is very important, and that we have some of the best educational institutions across our province. We should be promoting those, that they are full at all times. I'll give you an example. Down in Bonavista, the college, they had a class that they wanted to promote there, but there were no spaces in the town of Bonavista to accommodate the students who wanted to come. They had to cancel the program. But here we have, these are vital economic drivers in each of those communities. And as you know, particularly in the rural areas, every economic driver that we have is vital to support so that people from anywhere in Canada, across the world, can come to, experience what we have to offer.
What time is the presentation? One more time, Fraser.
The actual time will be Tuesday, July 9th, which is tomorrow, at 7:30 at the Bruno Centre. There's lots of parking in front of the Bruno Centre for the evening. And the two Zoom sessions, one is going to be at 12 noon on Wednesday, July 10th, and the second one is at 7:30 to 8:30 p.m., also on July 10th.
I appreciate your time. Good luck with these.
Thank you very much, Patty, and have a great day.
Same to you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Here we go. Space is shared. And, the last time we had one of these types of conversations, got some pretty immediate reaction via email saying that, people shouldn't even be talking about this. People in potential, risk for their own safety inside their own home. But of course, this is completely voluntary. No one's going to be told that you have to participate, regardless of what age you are, where you live, whether or not you have 5 empty bedrooms in the house. So it's completely up to folks if they'd like to entertain it. Maybe just see if it's a suitable fit for them by attending, whether it be the Zoom presentation and or tomorrow evening in person at the Bruno Centre at 7:30 p.m. Let's go ahead and take a break. If you're in the St. Giles Metro region, the number to dial to get in the queue is 709-273-5211. Elsewhere, toll-free long distance, 1-888-590-VOCM, which is 8626. We're taking a break, and then we're coming back. Welcome back to the program. Well, we know that the current federal Liberals have been involved in many an ethics investigation, including the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister's office themselves. But there's one that's been apparently clued up by the current federal ethics commissioner, which is a gentleman named Conrad Van Finkelstein. So this regarding the Employment Minister, Randy Boissonnault. The accusation was that he had broke the conflict of interest rules because he was involved with a business. The allegation was he was involved in a business and doing business deals while sitting in the federal cabinet, which of course is an absolute no-no. So this is regarding Mr. Boissonnault's involvement in a company called Global Health Imports. So he has been involved in managing, and he was one of the co-founders of this particular unit. So it's a medical supply company. And he did co-found it when he was already serving in cabinet. So this also goes back to a text conversation that happened on the 8th of September of 2022 between GHI, which was Global Health Imports, GHI co-founder and COO Stephen Anderson, and a buyer named Malvina Gowie, and that's the principal of the Gowie Group. So inside of the text messages, Anderson sent Gowie a message from someone named Randy asking for a partner call about a business deal between GHI and the Gowie Group. So now they go back to say, it's kind of flimsy stuff in here. Mr. Boissonnault says he has no involvement since he was re-elected back in 2021, or since he was elected in September of 2021. But here's where it gets pretty flimsy stuff. Randy Boissonnault denies that he is the Randy in question. And of course, when Mr. Anderson has been asked about it, he says there's someone involved in logistics that is named Randy, and that's who he was referring to. Now, what is absent from Mr. Anderson's testimony here is that he would not provide a surname. I mean, everything could be put to bed pretty quickly if indeed whoever the head of logistics is as Global Health Imports give us Randy's last name, because then maybe, just maybe, you can plug some of the holes. But apparently, this was all good enough for the ethics commissioner, which is pretty odd. He said quite plainly that he doesn't see any need for any further investigation of this one. And regarding the Employment Minister, Randy Boissonnault, who's been on this show in the recent past since the most recent federal budget, and this is all about the labour market transfer dollars. So the specifics are called the Workforce Development Funding Program. There's a shortfall right across the country. The feds have pretty much said that it's going to fall to the provincial government to pick up the slack. There's still $142 million on the table for these support agencies to avail of, but there's a shortfall of $16.8 million. We've had a couple of people who work at these employment support agencies, and they say that even if it sounds like it's only $16.8 million, it will have an appreciable negative impact on their ability to find folks who need additional support to get a job. So The province has indeed stepped up and backfilled that number to the tune of 6 months, but this is going to be an issue that grows year over year. Now, it was first established a number of years ago, and in 2022, I believe the transfer was some $3.5 billion from the federal government to the provinces. So if you're someone working in that particular arena and want to give us some sort of update as to the provincial backstop for the course of 6 months and what it really means to your programs, we had Sean Weir on, who works at Avalon Workforce Agency, I believe is the right proper name of his organization, and what might impact be on the autism support program. So for the most vulnerable to have maybe a bigger set of hurdles in front of them because of this shortfall in cash in the workplace or the workforce development funding program, we're happy to take that on. Just make that link with the Federal Minister Randy Boissonnault, who's the Ethics Commissioner, said he did nothing wrong. Okay, line number 2. Clayton, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hi, Clayton, you're on the air. Clayton, you're on the air. Go ahead. Well, I'm not
Hello?
sure. Yes, Clayton, David's speaking with him now. And while that's happening, let's check in on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Openline, you know what to do. Clayton, are you there? You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, Patty.
Hi there.
Yeah, I'm a pensioner. I get my pension. I get on the court worker. I got 2 stints in. I write in my need now. Trying to get the government to help cover some of the cost of my part. I got to pay $182 towards my worker now. Every year it goes up. Government don't take no part of the cost, so I got to take it all when it goes up. And they won't answer the phones in the premier's office. They won't answer. They're ignoring people. Only answering who they want to talk to now, I think. What is going on? You call and call, no answer. It's time that premier got kicked out of there. We don't need him. We don't need a doctor in there getting on with what he's getting on with. He's not doing his job. Hello?
So what specifically are you asking government to do for you? Just cover the increase in your medication?
182, I'm only getting the pension and getting hurt. 182, I got to pay a month towards my worker. I need my worker. I called and tried to get a bus pass because people in St. John's, seniors in St. John's, all these pensioners can get a bus pass. Government is covering it. We can't get it out here in Cornerbrook. I didn't ask them. And now I got a call from Grandpa. I got to deal with what's her name in Cornerbrook, Jerry Bernard's office. Nobody answering the calls, and the premier's out there ignoring people. That's not a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is an interesting difference between, low-income earners in and around town to be able to avail of Metrobus with a free pass, not being afforded to folks on the West Coast and Cornerbrook, which I'm not even sure why that would be the case, but yeah.
I don't know either. But anyway, they say they don't make exceptions for people that are lawyers. They do. I know somebody here, a senior, same as me. She's getting a worker.
Okay.
She's getting her pension, same as me, getting the same money. Actually, she might be getting a little bit more. She gets to 100. She gets to 75 every 2 weeks from Western Hill. I can't get that. She gets what she wants. And I know her. And then they look up and say, you can't talk about that. You can't talk about it. It should be talked about. Because that's why they're getting away with it. Everything is... I've been trying, putting with them, getting nowhere because they don't answer their phones anymore. I called all last week, 3 days last week, trying to get out of them because one day the premier's office did call me back and she was supposed to find out something for me and call me back, but I haven't heard back from them.
And I see your emails. Does anybody ever reply to your emails?
Pardon?
I see your emails as well. So does anybody ever reply to those?
No, I don't. No, I don't get no emails from nobody. I'm not very good on the computer. I use them, but I can get the email and read them. But The point is, our government is ignoring the seniors out there. They won't do anything for them. These cottages they've worked on, they won't do anything for them. Nothing at all. Then he says he's doing everything for the seniors. He's not being fair. He's not being honest. Because he's not out there. He's not doing nothing for us.
I appreciate the time, Clayton. Anything else you want to say this morning?
Yeah, he should be helping us. I got a friend of mine, $28,000 in the hole paying for his drugs. He can't get no help from the government. $28,000 in the hole on his credit cards. And don't tell me, and you can't tell me he's not. I've seen these bills. He showed them to me. And I know what I'm talking about. That's the kind of government we got. They're ignoring some and taking care of the others. We can't get a bus pass. I can't. I need one because of my knee and my hip. But all those foreigners coming in here, they're getting bus passes. They're telling me I have to go to the doctor 8 times a month. Who goes to the doctor 8 times a month? Nobody. But the foreigners don't have to. They can get their bus passes.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for the call.
Crucifying us for taking care of them foreigners. They're taking good care of them, and I'll say it because I don't care anymore because there's enough of it. It's time for them to start out on their own a little bit more.
I appreciate the time. I wish you good luck. Thanks, Clayton.
Yep. Okay. Right.
Take care. All right, and on those issues like the seniors benefit, now there was a caller last week looking for some more information about what's been proposed insofar as a basic income for people between the ages of 60 and 64. It is apparently coming. I don't know if it's been thoroughly structured as of yet, but then even reference to seniors benefits, and there is Stats Canada tried to tell me on Friday that the wages across the country rose 5.4% in in June, as opposed to 5.1% the year prior. I'm not so sure that really reflects how my pocketbook is feeling, but our purchasing power is way down. So one idea that people are throwing about is regarding the seniors benefit. Now, it didn't indeed see an increase in the most recent provincial budget, so it gets as high as $1,516. So that's payable to people with a net family income, individuals with a net family income, up to $29,402, which is a pretty paltry amount of money to live on. That's all according to the Department of Finance. The benefit eventually phases out in full if your net family income rises to $42,404. The concept being floated there is to index the seniors benefit to inflation. Because it's one thing to see the maximum benefit of $1,516, but that much money would go X amount of distance back in 2018 or 2019 versus today. I mean, the price of some of the things, including groceries, it's hard to understand how they're going to come back to earth somewhat. So an index of a benefit to inflation for folks who are already earning very, very little makes sense to me. Let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, plenty of show left for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Well, the comment I made off the top is not sitting well with one particular person regarding military spending. And what I said is something along these lines, is that in years past, I didn't think I saw or heard a keen focus of many Canadians talking about military spending. Of course, if you're in the military or in a military family, very likely that was a concern of yours. I did go on to say that obviously we've told many, many stories about veterans who, upon leaving active service, have a really wicked hard time to try to avail of some of the services from Veterans Affairs Canada. And even some comments that have been made in the past politically is that we can't afford to do more, and that's coming from the current federal Liberals. So when I said I didn't think I heard a whole lot of concern about military spending, because the polls are always very, very similar. It's the economy and jobs and taxes and healthcare and the environment and industry and all those types of things. And of course, they're the notables, right? Because for the most part, politics is all about pocketbook, in large part. And so the reference to military spending, I wasn't turning a deaf ear or a blind eye to the need to see investment in the military, because of course we've told the story many times about the review of the Canadian Armed Forces and our woeful lack of preparedness. On average across the different branches of the military, it's around 58% prepared if we had to actively engage. And we do have active operations in Latvia today. So when we know that the Prime Minister is now in Washington at the NATO summit, and 23 of the 32 members are expected to hit their 2% of GDP on defense spending this year, we won't be one of them. And so, of course, there has been some recent announcements from the federal government. And as a reminder, in the most recent federal budget, $8.1 billion in new defense spending over the next 5 years, an additional $73 billion in defense spending over the next 2 decades, bringing our GDP percentage to 1.76 by 2030, which of course still falls short. And so what that means for the possibility of diplomatic isolation or whatever the case may be, I guess we'll hear some of those stories as reporters cover what's happening at the particular NATO summit at this moment. Let's go to line number 3. Good morning, Lindy. You're on the air.
Morning, Paddy.
Morning to you.
How rolls the battle?
Best kind, I suppose. How about you?
So far, so good.
Good.
I suppose so, anyway. But in the meantime, has there been a reduction in the GST, HST?
No.
Well, mine is $80 short.
Are you sure that wasn't in your carbon tax rebate?
No, sir. Not carbon tax rebate.
Yeah, no, there was no cut in GST, is to my understanding. Of course, that was paid out and it hit Canadian bank accounts last week on the 5th of July. They talk about single Canadians get up to $519 or $520 over the 4 payments. If you are married, common law partner, you get upwards of $680. Every child 19. Every child under 19, I'm just trying to make sure I get this right off the top of my head. Children under the age of 19, there's $179 in additional credit, but I have heard zero reference to any decrease.
And I've got one more question now for you.
Sure.
It was always deposited. I've got 2 bank accounts. It was always deposited in the same bank account. This time, it was deposited in the other bank account. How could that happen?
Well, it's all based on your 2023 tax return. So do you get your tax return direct deposit into a bank account?
Yes.
Well, did it go to the bank account that you just got your GST check in?
No, yes.
So that would be why. Whatever you use on your 2023 tax return would be the information they use for the GST.
Okay, sir.
Yep.
That's what I wanted to know.
No problem.
Thanks, Paddy, very much.
Anytime. Thanks, Lindy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And, of course, people are not wrong in saying that, well, the GST rebate, you're basically giving me back my own money. For some people, they look at consumption taxes as a pretty fair way to tax Canadians. And when the federal government and other media outlets last week talking about here comes your GST credit on the 5th of July, is be reference to not only you just give me back my own money, but also talking about the fact that, this bloody current government, the GST is as old as 1991 and introduced by then Prime Minister Brian Mulroney and the Progressive Conservatives. And at that moment in time, it was 7%. It's been rolled back a couple of times, obviously back to the 5% where it lands today. The last rollback was under Prime Minister Harper to make it 5%. And then, of course, you come up with the concept of the harmonised sale tax, the HST. And in this province, of course, we have a pretty significant amount of sales tax that we pay provincially. But yeah, I don't think there's been a decrease in the GST rebate. And this month, for people who are eligible, GST on the 5th, then the carbon rebate comes on the 15th of July. You will see a reduction there. Again, off the top of my head, I think last year was $164, now down to $149. Why? Because the federal government made a decision to carve out the carbon tax on home heating fuels over the course of 3 years. And as a result, less coming in the way of a rebate for people who are getting them here in this province. There's also another benefit check that comes out in July. That's for folks who are eligible for the child benefit. I think that's the 19th of the month, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, let's keep rolling before we get to the break and say good morning to Shirley on 1. Good morning, Shirley. You're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy.
Good morning to you.
How are you this morning on this beautiful morning?
So far, so good. Thank you, Shirley. How about you?
Well, so only. Paddy, why I'm calling, I'd like to send out a thank you on behalf of our family to the Burland Fire Department. We lost our family home on Thursday and it burnt to the ground. And so I'd like to thank on behalf of our family, the volunteer fire department and everybody who reached out to help in any way, and continue to help.
Well, I'm sure they appreciate the bouquet, and to everyone, whether it be the fire department and folks who are trying to help you out. Do you happen to know what happened to cause the fire, Shirley?
I'm not sure at the moment, Paddy. I'm not quite sure yet.
And so...
And we had... Yeah, sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. So I guess we'll find out sooner than later what the cause of the fire was. But what's happening with you and your family? Where are you living?
She was home on holidays from Alberta, and they lost everything. Lost everything, right? Don't need to clothes on their back. But anyway, and actually my sister was lucky to get out, right? My brother saved my sister.
Is everybody okay?
Oh, it was okay, but it's so heartbreaking.
Oh, absolutely right. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there, obviously when you lose everything, I was going to ask, do you need anything? But I suppose you need everything. Are there any specific items that the family needs now that we might be able to help with?
Well, Paddy, my cousin, she got a fund set up at the credit union in Bay Bulls in name of a savings account, and under the Clough Family Fund at gmail.com. If anybody would like to make a donation, or they could drop by the bank and make a little donation or whatever, right? Yeah, to help out.
So that's the Clough Family Fund. So I'm assuming that's CLOWE.
Yeah.
The Clough Family Fund at gmail.com, and that's at the credit union, I think you said?
In Bay Bulls,
yes, Bay Bulls, okay. I'll jot that down just in case anybody's asking me for the information. Well, I guess ultimately, it's good news that everybody's okay. I can't imagine the feeling of loss when you lose your family home, because some things we can replace, some things you can't.
Yeah, and the home has been there, Paddy, like it's an old historic home. It was a railway tractor years ago, railway station. There years ago, right? About probably, I think the house was maybe 120 years old.
Oh my.
Yeah, and that's it's just so heartbreaking. But thank God, no one was hurt, right? And so, and our siblings, thank God, that they got their saved, and so you just have to. As a mother and father must be watching over him and God, right, that morning.
So who was living in the home? Just your sister?
No, my sister was home on holidays from BC.
Oh, I see. Okay.
She comes home every summer, but my two brothers were there, right, living there.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
and one brother, like he has bad sleep apnea, and that. Well, two of them got disabilities, right? So, but anyway, just say thank God everybody's all alive, right? And so I just want to thank the fire department, and they saved actually my sister's house next door, because if the wind had been blowing the wrong way, that would be gone up in flames, right? And we had no insurance on the house.
Terrible set of circumstances. I'm really sorry to hear this happen to your family. And if anybody would like to be of any assistance here and make it some sort of donation, if you have the resources to do it, at the credit union in Bay Bulls, it's under the Clough Family Fund at gmail.com account. I appreciate the time. Say hello to the family for me, Shirley.
Thank you, Paddy, and thank you for your time.
My pleasure. Take good care.
God bless you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Can you imagine the loss? Right? I mean, and I think I said something along the lines of, some things you can replace, like you can buy a new couch and a TV and a mattress and the like, but some of the things that you don't even think about that stockpile or pile up over the course of the years, like a couple of things right off the bat jump into my mind, and I know I'm a bit of a suck on this front, but like even just the baby books and some of those old pieces of nostalgia belong to the children. Can't replace those things. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Say good morning to the Mayor of Fogo Island. That's Andrew Shea. Mayor Shea, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you doing?
Couldn't be better. How about you?
Not too bad. Just want to get on to give a message to the general public that the ferry is back on service. Our big ferry is back. We have 2 boats running now. Our new ferry is running from Fogo Island to across direct, making trips, 5 trips a day, I think 6 trips a day. And the smaller one is doing a combined trip with Fogo Island St. John's.
So let's see if I can phrase this properly. Was the loss of the boat, of course, it was dry dock for quite a long time, and there's no replacement vessel of its size unless you take the boat from the Belle Island run. So what's the real life impact? Is it more a matter of frustration and lack of planning or consultation, or what was the interruption felt like, with whether it be individual passengers and or business?
Oh, it was terrible, Paddy, because the boats couldn't handle the the veteran can handle 70 vehicles basically, and she got room for a lot of trucks and everything. Right, she's made for the run. Whereas the Beaumont can take 2 tractor trailers, and when 2 tractor trailers goes on, it takes up 2 full lines right up the middle. So half the ferry is gone. So you got 13 to 15 cars. So there was very little traffic moving, and it had a very negative effect on our tourist industry. Terrible. So that's why I'm on this morning, to let the tourists know that the veteran's back on, running full time. We got a good ferry service now, and there's no problems getting back and forth.
Well, that's the good news, and it's too bad it took as long as it did. And, you know, just in the broad strokes of the marine sector and the management of, you know, we hear stories where, whether it be a dragger or a Coast Guard vessel or whatever, in dry dock for repairs and the quick turnaround time compared to how the ferries get treated. And, you know, I heard some vague reference about, you know, it's hard to come up with some of these parts or what have you, but that's not really the problem. The folks living on Fogo Island or Belle Island or Change Islands or Farewell or whatever the case may be, if we have scheduled maintenance, which, of course, we're also told that the engines are going to have to be replaced in either both or one of the Veteran and the Legionnaire, which seems like a lot of work to have done with an 8-year-old vessel.
Yeah, well, we had our meeting with the minister, us in Belle Island and Change Islands, and we had a very good meeting. But our ferry, the Veteran, is going off again in September, and they're replacing 3 motors. And when she comes off docked in, the Legionnaire is going on, and they're doing the same thing that took 6 months to do with our ferry. They're replacing, I don't know, the alarm systems or what, and then they're replacing the 3 motors in her. So I think the 6 motors for the 2 boats is costing around $20 million.
Yeah, that's what Minister Abbott said. The price tag so far is $21 million, which sounds like an exorbitant amount of money for what are very new modern vessels, which have been a so-called problem even since the day they left the shipyards, the damaged shipyards.
Yeah, that will put us up to about $50 million in repairs on them 2 boats. They're pretty close, 40 to 50 million in repairs so far since we got them, the last 7 or 8 years, you know. And there's not that many hours on the motors, you know. So I guess what the government is trying to do is to do enough work on them so that they'll replace all the systems and hope it works, you know.
Yeah.
Because we're concerned now about September. You know, like September is coming, our boat is going, and that was our main concern with our meeting, is what's going to happen now when the Veteran goes off for 4 months and the Belle Island ferry could be off for 10 months, you know, doing the motors and what they did with ours. So, you know, you're looking at a year with one of the boats off. So what do we do now? So that's why we were in for the meeting and asked the minister that by September, you know, they have something else to send down to Fogo Island besides the Beaumont, you know, because she can't handle the traffic.
But what's the possible answer to that? Because, I mean, we all know, and I have no interest in pitting community against community, but we only have 2 vessels of that size, so if one or both are off the runs, what actually could be a reasonable backup system? What does that even look like?
I don't know, but, you know, like if the government's going to put money into Fogo Island and Belle Island and Change Islands, you know, for to develop the tourist industry, then you got to put in the infrastructure to go with it. You know, that don't make sense that you don't have a boat. So I know they're doing the best they can, but, you know, and they inherited some. But that what happened in the past got no bearing on anything now, because we have to correct the problem. That's what we have to do, and that's why we're in to see what we can do. You know, like, I don't know what the solution is, but you know, like, Patty, we had a boat down here the year for 3 or 4 or 5 months, and she was probably costing $20,000 a day. You know, so is that the solution? Get someone to come in like that? We're spending a lot of money.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a pretty hefty sum. And the provincial ferry service in full costs around $90 million a year, but that's just for the operations of the vessels themselves. Mayor Shea, anything else you want to tell the residents or the listeners this morning?
No, I just wanted to mention about we haven't spoke about our credit union coming to Fogo Island and replacing the Bank of Nova Scotia. So we're well on the way for that. Now the manager will be hired in August. We're working on the bank building where we got the machines ordered, the bank machines and the sorting machines, and the bank has been brought up to standard. So on October the 17th, the bank will, the credit union, Atlantic Edge, will officially open on Fogo Island, because I think it's International Co-op Day, and that's a co-op bank and we're a co-op island, then that's an appropriate day to open. So the 17th of October, we'll have our credit union opened.
Also, very good news. I appreciate the time, Mayor Shea. Thanks for the call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. And, there's other sorts. I think Lewisport is losing their Scotiabank. Scotiabank has been pretty open and public about the fact that they're closing many of their outlets across the province and in different parts of rural Canada. But, of course, Lewisport, not as bad as the potential problem in Fogo Island, where that was the only bank. I'm pretty sure there's a CIBC in Lewisport, which keeps it a little bit of a different set of circumstances. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Alan. You're on the air.
Yes, good morning, sir. First-time caller.
Welcome to the show.
I'm just phoning to let everybody in Hershey around be vigilant. I was robbed out on Saturday night. I left and went to my daughter's at 4:30 in the evening and never come back before 10 o'clock. When I came back, somebody was after going in my house and steal my deposit box with $6,000 in and all my personal papers, my land deed, my will, and all my birth certificates and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I shouldn't ask about that much money around the house because that's your own business. You do what you want with your own money. Do you think that there's someone knew that there was that amount of money in the house?
Well, I tell you what, I had two boxes in my closet in my bedroom, right? And they went in through the front door. They never touched another thing. They went in, and the black box was the one that I had everything in, and the blue box I had there was nothing in that. And they took the black box, and they never touched another thing.
So do you have any, I'm not going to ask you for names, sir, obviously, but do you have some understanding of who that might be? Because that's a very specific thing to know where to go and what to target.
Like, I got ideas, but like I said, you can't point fingers, right?
Well, you can point them at the police.
Yeah, I was talking to the cops. I sure they never done nothing. They came. I called them that night that I missed my box, and they never even came. Not for 2 days after. And when they came, I asked them could they take fingerprints or anything like that, and they said no, you wouldn't get no fingerprints now because we're living in the house.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can. Yeah, but you can obviously, disregard those who are members of the household that may have their prints all over the place. It's the prints that are foreign to members of the household that are important.
That's right. And in order to get in the house, like I got a disabled daughter, right? And she had her wheelchair parked right in front of the door, and there's only a foot or so between her chair and the television stand there for to get in. So they squat in between that. So like I said, they had to catch out to something before when they come in, right? And when they went out, they had the box. If they had the box in their hand, they had to catch out to the door knob or catch out to something,
Yeah. Well, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Whether it be, the problems you got to go through replacing the deed and the will and other pieces of paperwork or documentation, but $6,000 cash is nothing to sneeze at.
No, I had $6,000 because I tell you why I had a bit of money there. We're thinking about going away, and we usually goes away in summertime, like for a little holiday, right?
Yeah.
And this is why instead of going run down the bank picking that money, I had it there in the bank, right?
Well, it's a terrible loss, and if anybody out there listening, all of a sudden, one of the folks in your social circles all of a sudden has got more money than they've ever had in the past, maybe, just maybe, they rob poor Alan of his money and do the right thing. I appreciate this. If anything comes from a police investigation, I'd be curious to hear an update.
Yes, I will. I got a reward put up. I got a reward of $1,000 put all around all the stores and everything around here. So like I said, somebody might spit out something sometime, right?
$1,000 is a good motivator.
Yeah.
Alan, I'm sorry that happened to you. And folks, there you go. There's a reward of $1,000 if you know who absolutely knew what to look for inside of Alan's home, went directly for it and robbed his money and all of his paperwork. If $1,000 is of interest to you, you know what to do. Call the RCMP.
Yeah, good nothing, Patty.
Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, thanks.
All the best. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty heavy loss. And in the line, the subject line, before I clicked that call, it said home invasion. So I'm glad it wasn't exactly that, because those stories are unbelievable. Let's go ahead and take a break for the news. When we come back, plenty of time for you. Don't go away.
Your voice in Newfoundland and Labrador's biggest conversation.
If you want to know what's happening in your province, tune in to Openline every day.
Have your say weekday morning starting at 9 a.m. on Openline with Paddy Daly on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Just a traffic announcement. So apparently there's been a multi-vehicle collision at Topsail Road and Cowan Avenue. So apparently the traffic is stopped in both directions, and apparently it involves an ambulance as part of one of the vehicles involved in this collision. So avoid at all costs. Okay, let's go to line number 3. Say good morning to the Liberal member for Burgeo Lapoil. He's the Minister of Industry, Energy and Technology. That's Andrew Parsons. Minister Parsons, you're on the air.
Good morning, Paddy. How are you?
Doing okay this morning. How about you?
Well, I'm on the west coast of our province, and it's a beautiful sunny day, so, not a bad start to the week, I guess.
So, on the west coast, what do you know about this memorandum of understanding between the Port of Corner Brook and CWP Global regarding not only the use of green hydrogen, they want to build a capacity for 5 gigawatts of wind, but the green iron part of the story? Do you know anything about this?
Yes, certainly I'm aware. I've had CWP and the port reach out, although we haven't met. Although I do think it's actually in my calendar for very, very near in the future to sit down and get more of an understanding of where their heads are and what they want to do. Certainly it fits into many of the things we've been talking about, and I've been talking about a lot when we talk about green steel, when we talk about hydrogen, and things like that. And I know the Port of Corner Brook have been very aggressive. Certainly they've been out meeting with opportunities, trying to find something to do. So, it fits a lot of the things we talk about, but like many things, it's still early in the game. So I'm looking forward to sitting down, getting more of an understanding of where they want to go, being able to ask questions. But again, it's nice to see that there's industrial opportunities here to fit into what the world is wanting now, which is green steel. But like anything, it's early stages, so I don't get too caught up in it yet.
This wouldn't be your department necessarily, but of course, working hand in glove with Minister Davis and the environment portfolio, I know there's been an appeal, at least one appeal filed on behalf of, I can't remember the group's name, out on the west coast or the Port Peninsula, to talk about World Energy GH2. But in the big broad strokes, and this is a conceptual kind of question, but they'll talk about the impact on individuals and families and the community and the environment, but they also talk about the concept, and there's been a lot of back and forth here about social license. In your opinion, or in your view, what constitutes social license?
It's a great question, and I'll just preface this by saying you're right. When I see these appeals come in, I actually see them on the news or in the emails that come out. That's not something, we are firmly not, we stay away from the regulatory side of things. We let, those EAs be handled by the Department of Environment. We don't weigh in on that. Social license to me, and it's probably a little tough for me to put a perfect terminology or perfect description on it, but what I think about it is, generally speaking, when it comes to development of one's area on any number of fronts, what do the people of that area necessarily want? Social license is something. Is there an acceptance of the concept and idea about a possible development, but what that will affect people? And something we've talked about, certainly when we've been going back a few years now, when we talked about our process, is not necessarily a social license an accepted part of it, because it sometimes can be very hard to measure, very hard to weigh. But we do talk about community involvement. So we talk about, community having the opportunity for input, talking about the opportunities to have sessions and talk to people, to give people an understanding of what is there. And at the end of the day, look, we've seen this globally, where in many cases, things can happen or not happen based on the will of the people in an area. It's something certainly I'm aware of, but different people have different ideas. But I know my idea or my concept or thought process may be very different from some who have a very different thought process about that, and certainly doesn't align with mine.
Yeah, and I don't know how we actually measure it, because what's government's role here? We'll have World Energy GH2 say that they've got X amount of percentage in support of the project. Some groups in opposition will say the exact opposite. So how does government evaluate or adjudicate or come up with the concept of this social license?
This is the question. And everybody has a different valuation. What I do think What I do think here is that in many cases, people's acceptance of it will be determined in some way, shape, or form by, we do live in a democracy. So if people don't like the decisions that, say, someone like myself or any other elected official make, whether it's on a municipal, provincial, or federal level, you have every opportunity to get rid of those people and bring in someone else that's more aligned with your community's views. That's just one aspect of that. We've seen in many cases, we've seen protests that can happen, and that happens about just about anything. Sometimes it gets skewed, though, and it gets crossed. I mean, when I go to speak at the Energy NL conference and someone has signs up there saying, arrest the Premier and arrest myself and we should be arrested, that's a whole different ballgame. And then we get into, I'm not sure, quite frankly, I think that's ridiculous. I think that's beyond stupid. And it takes away from the people that I do think both sides have legitimate questions about the impact of industrial development or resource development in an area. And sometimes it gets lost because you have extremists that go along with this, it's a different narrative, whereas I do know there are people out there on both sides that have questions and may support or not support. That's just, I guess, a few comments I would make on that.
Okay. And it's just very much a conceptual issue. I don't even know how to put my thumb on exactly how we approach it. But inside the world, like if you go to an Energy NL conference and people have signs up saying that you should be arrested, it's the whole concept regarding not only industry development, whether it be in mining or the oil and gas sector or whatever the case may be. And there is something going on that, again, it might not be directly your bailiwick, but it does have an overlap with your department. It's the province has decided to spend $6 million into R&D regarding carbon capture projects. We've heard the Premier say that we could be a world leader in this carbon capture. On the west coast of the country, they're talking about direct injection of the carbon emissions into the basalt rock formations, and 25 years later, they turn into basalt rock. But here we're talking about depleted oil wells. The concept here is that there's a reason why the oil industry is so big on this concept. It's because it allows them to continue to produce, all the while looking like they're doing something about controlling emissions. Is this greenwashing?
Again, I think people have different perspectives. And the first thing I would say, Patty, and I've said this from literally day one in this department, look, I don't comment this from an engineering background or a scientific background. In many cases, I do rely on people that are far smarter than me to help make this. So when I see someone like Dr. Leslie James, or when I see people that are within different departments of environment say that these are the types of measures we need to take in order to hit net zero emission targets, then I think there's something to that. Again, just coming from a meeting of all the energy and mines ministers for provinces, territories, and federal government, this is something that is being talked about on a national scale. It's something we need to do. So I don't necessarily think that this would be something that's greenwashing. When I see people that are not connected to the oil industry talking about this is an opportunity to use natural structures in which to put the carbon in, that is not going to have a completely detrimental effect. Again, when I hear someone like, sits behind me in the House of Assembly, someone like Perry Tremper, again, someone who spent many years in environmental science, far prior to getting in politics, talking about the positive aspects of it, I listen to it. So, look, I think it's an opportunity. I think it's something we need to consider, and we have the opportunity here. So not to do that, eliminate yourself from a pool of people that there's many others that are moving in this direction.
I mean, by concept, it can work, direct capture at the source, whether it be offshore oil or whatever the case may be. For the largest carbon sequestration plant or facility in the country in Alberta, just shut the doors. Couldn't make the business model work. They said that they could probably capture 90% of the emissions. Turns out they never hit 60. And they couldn't make the business model work, period. So that $2.5 billion facility has now been shuttered, which is also quite interesting.
That's the question. I mean, and again, I know that the feds continue to look into that direction. The reality is that when we move into net zero, when we talk about renewable energy, there's still a lot of things that are up in the air, and I do think it takes some misfires. So the good news is that far prior to us, and that's why we're doing when you think about it, $6 million is a very low amount of money to put in research and development rather than a far greater commitment to put into actually building the structures per se. We still require a lot of work on this. And so we'll continue to look into whether it can be done and what's the output of this. So work to be done, but it's something that I think is absolutely worth keeping on the topic of conversation.
The amount of money coming from the federal government and the manufacturers, whether it be Volkswagen or otherwise, for some of these EV battery plants in Ontario, and of course some of it's based on hitting thresholds or benchmarks before you understand what the tax credit looks like, and it's even more than the industry's complement to the GDP, some of the subsidy dollars. The question there would be, do you know what the conversations are between some of those facilities, some of those proponents, the feds and producers here? Because there's long been that concern about the supply chain, that we can indeed have a domestic supply chain issue here versus mine it, send it elsewhere and then buy the battery off whoever, the Chinese, for instance. So do you have any status update about those types of conversations? Because we've got the minerals. Well, we've got, I think, 29 of the 32 required for some of these projects. So what do we know?
So absolutely. I mean, I'm certainly aware of certain aspects. I mean, I wouldn't be involved from a federal perspective or from a manufacturer perspective on what has gone into the credits going into building an EV facility in one of these two, Ontario, Quebec, basically is what we're talking about here. What I do know is that I have conversations about the supply chain when it comes to critical minerals. In fact, one of the big topics of conversation coming from that meeting last week is we need to do more as a country when we talk about getting ourselves in that conversation. When we talk about spurring investment and then going from exploration into production of those. We cannot fall behind other parts of the world. And a lot of this stems from the fact that many of the supplies are in jurisdictions where I guess the diplomatic thing is to say that maybe they have far less ESG standards or us. Do you want the supply for necessary critical minerals to fall into other jurisdictions in the world that we may not necessarily have a solid relationship with? So we in Canada, who again, we have a global reputation for fairness and for great standards, for a robust environmental regime, but we still need to find a way to get in the game quicker. I mean, that doesn't mean you take away or cut corners, but we have to get quicker. So that's a big part of that conversation there. When you talk about outputs and when we talk about offtake agreements, again, sometimes that's better left to the owners of the mines and the companies themselves. What I deal with the fact is what can we do to increase when we talk about permitting, and what can we do to not, again, take away from an environmental process, but to streamline it. We all know that sometimes things can get caught up in bureaucracy, and we need to find a way to streamline that, but at the same time making sure that the same controls are in place. That's what I'm concentrated on, and convincing these companies that, again, this is not a cheap thing. Convincing companies to get into the game when it comes to spending that investment here, that's what we want to do more of.
Do we have any applications, whether it be from juniors or otherwise?
Well, again, we've had some significant finds. So one of the big things, and again, I put this out, and this does relate to the CWP conversation, is that our iron ore is now, we listed as a critical mineral prior to Christmas, followed suit by Quebec, and now it is listed federally as a critical mineral. That was a big step forward and a signal globally that this is how important we take that. Very interestingly, over here on the West Coast, in fact, just off the Virgil Road, we had the first find of lithium in Newfoundland and Labrador. So part of that is taking it, there's a mass of what is going on here. And a part of this is, when you take companies like Sokoman and Benton, is going out there and talking about what they have. Now, again, they get far more technical when they talk about the core, when they talk about the findings. And if anything, it's finding the money to continue to drill, to expand on the finding that you have. That's similar to what they're doing in any type of mining. But we do need to increase critical mineral exploration and prospecting here. We've tried to invest, but, it's hard for the province. The feds have come on board, but we need to spur that from the companies to make them invest, because they are also going to get a significant return on this.
And the feds need to come up with some of these clear definitions about what constitutes green when we talk about wind subsidies. A big difference between 15% and 40%, big difference between access to renewables in Nova Scotia versus here. And in the world of critical minerals, I mean, the bear run continues on lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite. And I know some of these mining plays will be long-term visions as opposed to what the market looks like today, but the bear run absolutely continues. Last one quickly before I have to go. Have the amendments to the Atlantic Accord to allow for offshore wind been finalized?
No, they are still in the Senate. actually. So I did appear at a cabinet committee on this, which it went through third reading. There's guys sitting in the Senate. The last time we appeared before them, there were some questions, actually more primarily from the Nova Scotia aspect of things in terms of Indigenous relations. My understanding is that it'll be back up on the go after summer, and still in time, hopefully, for us to do mirror legislation when our legislature opens in October. That's my understanding at the latest.
I appreciate your time this morning, Minister.
All right, thank you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye. Sandra Parsons, Minister of Industry, Energy, Technology. Let's take a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 2. Gary, you're on the air.
Yes, good day, sir.
Good day to you.
Yeah, just pull over there now because there's a bit of noise in the vehicle. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to touch base there with some of the good things that are happening in Paddy Isle in terms of mineral exploration and things. And I didn't get all of what the Minister just said, but I'd like to speak to you specifically, I guess, about Bay Vert and the recent consolidation of projects in that area by Firefly.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, that Bay Vert has been an area, of course, it's a mining district that has, past producing gold mines and copper mines and the like, but the area has never truly been consolidated to allow for proper exploration. In the last couple of years, we spent some effort to consolidate the claims in the area and put it into a company called Gold Hunter, and we've since optioned it off to the Australians, who are very aggressive people who have resources and funds to raise from outside of our country and within our country and around the world for that matter. But it's very interesting, I think, some of the current exploration work they're doing and really how much they should be able to boost the Bay Vert Peninsula again in terms of potential to have an operating mine and I guess all the good things that go with that.
It wasn't an insignificant transfer either. I mean, my recollection is there was in excess of 30 million shares with a value of around $15 million as part of this exchange Gold Hunter Firefly.
Yeah, that's what it was. There was a 30.5 million share exchange plus some $500,000 in cash, but there was also a finder's fee to a couple of individuals on top of that, which is part of the mining business. But what's really, with that amount of funds, I mean, these people paid over $60 million to really buy the debt of the former producer in the area, which, they developed the project in difficult times and had to take an approach to sort of get it done and get it running. But what really needs to happen in the Bay Vert area is you need to go at that type of operation with much greater production capacity and, to sort of go at it at a bigger scale in order to make it economic. That said, critical metals, copper currently trades somewhere around $4.65 US a pound. Is forecast to go much higher once interest rates change. And then also gold, of course, is over 3,200 Canadian as we speak, and that area is very rich in gold.
So in real life implications, what does this consolidation mean? So does it put a bit more financial horsepower behind the possibility for expansion, or what exactly will be the end result, or the hopeful end result?
Excellent question, because when I was the person that bought I guess the Newfound Gold people to Appleton originally in 2016, and behind that really was a gentleman by the name of Eric Sprott that really changed the perspective on that project. Not to take away from the hard work from the Keatses and Peter Dimmel and all the like, because they really developed the area. Don't want to take away from that whatsoever. But once Sprott was here and he looked at our opportunities, he invested in Valentine Lake, but also behind the scenes, I very much promoted the Bay Vert area and the fact that this whole area needs to be looked at in a different scale. So what's really happening in Bay Vert now is BlackRock, who's one of the largest financial institutions in the world, they're backing Firefly. And that's significant because, they need big scale projects, world scale projects. So when someone like that takes an interest in Bay Vert, that's really changed the water on the beans.
Well, I mean, Eric Sprott is not a man without means. He's a billionaire. I don't know exactly what his net worth would be, but one of his commodity hedge funds is actually publicly traded at the Toronto Stock Exchange, so he's a significant player.
He is, and And sometimes in this business, you call somebody a poor billionaire, because when you're trying to develop these projects, BlackRock, you're talking about trillions of dollars. So their financial means in terms of backing these things, even for them to sweep crumbs off their table, they can make something like Bay Verde happen. But they really bring a lot of other people of interest to then look at the area, and then other people in the area then and other projects. If Firefly is successful, then that'll really sort of put that area back on the radar.
Well, their financial and industry quote-unquote Rolodex is pretty thick.
Definitely,
no doubt about it.
So it's good to see. I'd like to also point out that Tim Proud and Sokoman are over in that area also doing some excellent work, and it'll be interesting to see what he finds. He's chasing a whole new thing going down towards Fleur-de-Lis, and so that's going to become, I think, very interesting. Follow-up work from Noranda and a guy that works with us, Garth Graves. He's an ex-Noranda guy. He drilled back there years ago in an area that Tim and them are chasing now. So. Yeah, it's all good. One other note, Patty, I'd like to end on is, of course, Search Minerals in Labrador. You haven't heard much from them lately. Are you curious about that at all?
I am. I actually had the fellow behind Search on the show maybe around this time last year.
Yes. So Search, like most companies, it's very difficult to keep those types of operations going and the funding and stuff. And I'll let the people that are now directing that, make their own comments on here. But, there's been a recent change in directorship, and there's a different group of people now trying to put, that project back, put a rudder back under that again and get it going. I will say that I had another company that I brought into the area called Nuclear Fuels, and we were looking at, because we originally developed that project, that was our discovery, Brian Penny and Aubrey Budgell and I. And, there's huge potential up there for rare earths. And one thing people didn't look at in the area is, there is uranium up there, which is separate, but niobium being a key mineral, so very hopeful for Search again.
Well, that last mineral, just pronounce it for me again.
Niobium.
Yeah, okay. So, and the first 6 months of 2023 saw a bit of a downpour on the price of things like lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, what have you. The issue here for me, and maybe I just focus in on this too much, is about being more in the secondary and tertiary processing business. Because at this moment of time, for some, like whether or not anyone listening gives a hoot about an EV, it's irrelevant because the world is thirsty for some of these products. Like China just dominates so much. They don't have the minerals themselves, but they have the manufacturing capacity. I believe the numbers, as I read, is in the world of lithium supplies, China is going to refine some 62 or 63% of that. In regard to cobalt, about 70% so. For some reason, the world has fallen prey to the financial might of China, as opposed to do more with the minerals that we're currently sitting on, as opposed to mine them, ship them somewhere else, and buy the battery back, which has been foolhardy to say the very least. There's an opportunity here in Canada, a massive opportunity.
There is, and when our government has the means to, I'm not sanctioning this, but to go to the basement and print money. When the leader of China said to me, I can't trust you, I don't want to talk to you, I would have told him that, I can print my own money and bring these resources into development. If someone really backs these things, so you can get, for things to become truly vertically integrated, which is what you're saying, that's where we need to get. And so, I guess it's difficult in terms of all the different peoples that, occupy the area in terms of, doing things right, which is important. But very much so, the government of Canada needs to step up to the plate here and put some meat on the bones when it comes to backing these types of projects.
I appreciate the time this morning, Gary. Thanks for the call.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Bye-bye. Just think about it. The world was held captive at the beginning of the pandemic regarding supply chain. Things like you couldn't buy a car, you couldn't get a TV, you couldn't get a dishwasher. Things like microprocessors and the dominance of Southeast Asia, whether it be in Thailand or Taiwan or Malaysia or China or Japan. They sat on the world's supply, the vast percentage of the world's supply. Consequently, we all waited and watched as the prices soared and the demand was there, but the product wasn't. Let's go ahead and take a break for the news. When we come back, plenty of time for you. Don't go away.
The Tim Powers Show. Join the conversation weekday afternoons at 4 p.m. on your VOCM.
Welcome back to the show. Let's go to line number 1. Good morning, Margot. You're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. It is a beautiful day out, isn't it?
Warm out there this morning.
For sure, for sure. I'd just like to say, first of all, thank you to everybody who keeps on looking and researching here in Newfoundland, because our net worth is incalculable, isn't it?
I'm sorry,
Really?
researching what?
Researching anything, and the gold and the whatever, the lithium, the
mining. Okay, sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, what I called about is to let you know that myself and Gary and Nick and Jerry went to see Come From Away in Gander last week, and it is absolutely incredible. The cast they're mesmerizing. Everything is just perfectly done. Have you seen it yet?
I have seen it. I loved it.
Oh my goodness!
And I didn't know if I would or not, because I'll be honest. Sometimes some productions are the so-called over-the-top Newfoundland kind of stuff, which is kind of not easy to relate to if you're not from here necessarily.
Right.
But I thought the story was lovely. The performances were great. I didn't see it here in the province. I saw it elsewhere, but I thought it was wonderful, and I really enjoyed it.
Yes, and it was headlined by Patrina Bromley, of course, who's very well known and who was in New York, I do believe. And anyway, we were just mesmerized. It was absolutely terrific. And I don't think there was a seat in the auditorium, to tell the truth. And I believe, I stand to be corrected, that this is running until September the 1st, every single night. So it's a great opportunity if someone is looking for something to do this summer and they want to be really, really, wonderfully entertained. It is wonderful that it's not a great thing that this thing happened, but what it has turned out to be, and let the other people's story come through and intermingled with our own. It is just tremendous, So, consequently, Nick has Patrina Bromley and several of the cast members from Come From Away in one of his word search books. So after the show was over, we found out where they were going, and they were headed to the Legion, of course, to celebrate. And so Jerry and Nick went up to the Legion, and he had his picture taken with Patrina, and she's pointing to her name, of course. But Gary and I stayed in the car because, we're older now, so we didn't want to get intermingled with, and it was, a long evening. So I'd really encourage anyone who hasn't taken it in yet to go and support these people who have, they're singing their hearts out, really and truthfully.
Yeah, and Patrina was absolutely part of the Broadway cast, which is remarkable, and she's something else, period. And then you add to it, one of the original producers, Michael Rubinoff, is co-producing this particular show. And then, of course, you've got the absolute firebrand and horsepower, that's Gillian Kiley, directing the show. So there's some pretty big heavyweights.
And, of course, Shelley Neville was there, I know that, and Peter Halley. I can't name everybody, of course, but some of these people I've seen before on Spirit of Newfoundland, that type of thing. But all just exceptional. And, we were in the very, very first seat, and we looked over, and I would say there was probably about 60 orchestral people down there. And it was like one note. I mean, these people are just spectacular, That's everything from drums to I wouldn't be able to name it, but like violins and clarinets and the whole kit and caboodle, as they say. But it was beautiful, and they don't always get credit for what they do because they're unseen,
Yeah, I mean, what goes on behind the scenes allows what happens in front of the scenes take place. So
exactly.
I appreciate the call, Margot. Thanks a lot.
No problem, Patty, and you have a fantastic week.
You too. Bye. Bye-bye.
and everybody else. Thank you.
Thanks, Margot. Bye-bye.
Okay.
And like last year, every single seat for every single performance was sold out and come from away. Then we had some interruption. I can't remember what the cause was, but a few shows, some of the members of the cast got sick. And so consequently, a bunch of shows had to be cancelled. I can't recall whether or not they added them to the back end to allow those folks who, they scrambled to get the tickets, which were like hen's teeth, maybe came from elsewhere outside of the province to see the performances, but it is completely worthwhile. And I don't know how to say it, but sometimes some of the productions can indeed incorporate a lot of really inside baseball Newfoundland vernacular and accents and things like that, which makes it a little bit unrelatable for folks who might not be, intricately available and understand all the backstory about the culture, traditions, and the accents and what have you. But Come From Away really does hit the sweet spot, I have to say. Let's keep rolling here. Let's go to line number 3. DJ, you're on the air.
Good morning, Patty. How are you, sir?
Doing okay. How about you?
Absolutely awesome. Great day and fabulous show as always.
Thanks.
It's fine. Look, you hit to the heart of the community, and that's the main reason I'm calling here, first and foremost. I want to give a shout-out to, first and foremost, your producer, David, to the entire VOCM team for what you do in the community and bringing up matters of importance within local community organizations and what they do to help others. I had a good friend of mine who went through an experience on Friday in which they had an issue with their dog. It was a health emergency. The dog started having tip-overs. They normally have procedures. It was certainly not in a regular thing, but it happened instantaneously. Like variables happen in life, and it happened. So they reached out to Heavenly Creatures, and this is where David, your producer, they'd called in on Friday because they had messaged and tried to get through, but it was an emergency. And David went out of his way to try and, within the parameters, to reach out to them to help. So at the end of the day, Jessica Rendell and her team and all the volunteers, and God love them all at Heavenly Creatures, they were able to help out. Without an extravagant amount of money, it was, we're talking in the low hundreds of dollars, but that dog was saved, and that dog would not have made it through the weekend. And I'm aware of what Heavenly Creatures does, but I never had it impact me after hearing the story, how much they actually help. So that's my first thing I want to say is Heavenly Creatures, if you're out there in the community listening, boy, animals are our family. Our family is family, and love is love. And we all, since COVID, it's a lot more closed down, and it's a lot tighter community. So the impact it makes when you help is incredible. And you may not know it, but you may change someone's life in one day, in one moment. And these people did last Friday.
Good to hear. And David does that all the time, and we're really lucky to have him. So you're right. Some of these animal protection or protective organizations, like Heavenly Creatures, SPCA, and others that you want to bring into the conversation, Beagle Paws, whatever it is people want to talk about, they do important work. Pardon me?
Amazing. All amazing. Continue, Patty. My apologies. Just all amazing.
No problem. Some of the issues also stem from the fact that they're overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed with animals, trying to place them with loving families. And, of course, some people will get themselves into the world of buying a pet, not knowing exactly what they're getting themselves into for the amount of time and care that it requires, the amount of money it requires to keep your pet healthy and fed and everything appropriately. So please do indeed make sure you know what you're getting yourself into so that we can spare some of the pressures on these animal rescue organizations.
And I would say, and that is incredible advice indeed, and most people are very cognizant, and that is true. But at the end of the day, with increased pressures between, hot dogs are no longer a 12-pack, they're a 10-pack, and they're not 99 cents, they're $5.99. And that's not the healthiest food to eat. With increased pressures, and the news just says it every day. More pressure. Oh, this is happening. And it's a financial pressure that overwhelms people. And what I try and say to people is keep your sphere of influence tight. Be as positive as you can. You can't affect the world every day. You're not involved in the biggest problems. But you can be happy to your friends and family and open that door for somebody. Uplift that one person in that one moment. And I'll leave you with this one analogy, Patty. I woke up this morning and I went outside on the deck for a moment. and there was this one little spider strand that was across it seemed like a nothing, and I almost knocked it out of the way because I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to walk through that anyway. But as the sun shone in that, there was a whole spider's web there, and it wasn't there yesterday. And I stepped over it, and I looked over it, and I said, my golly, that spider did so much to do that all night. Now, it cannot last there because it's in the middle of the entranceway to the house. But at the end of the day, I use that analogy. That spider's web could be kicked off, and nature will let that spider rebuild that web tomorrow, and it won't remember. But that person who's worked their whole life to do everything they can to make things right and do things good, in this society, it's a lot tougher. So as we move forward, don't be the one who irrelevantly kicks away that spider's web. Think about what you do. Consciously use your brain to help others, consciously, because it makes all the difference. And I thank Heavenly Creatures, and I thank Jessica Rendell, and I thank your producer, David, and I thank you, Patty, for being amazing in what you do. You're a conduit to the people, and you do it very well, sir.
DJ, appreciate the kind words, and a bit of positivity goes a long way, because you're absolutely right. You never know what one, and not to be corny, but what one little act of kindness might mean to the individual that you're offering it to. It could be a massive difference. It might feel like a small gesture to you when you're doing it, but it could make all the difference in the world to the person that you're trying to help out or give a leg up to. DJ, appreciate the time. Thanks for doing it.
Thank you, sir. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. Yeah, I mean, again, it's not cliche or just trying to be corny, but we all know it to be true. And you never know what circumstance the individual that you're talking with or have an interaction with, what they're actually dealing with. So just those little random acts of kindness, as they call them, can be pretty important stuff. Okay, let's go ahead and take a break. Final break of the morning. When we come back, still time for you. Don't go away. Welcome back to the show. I'm not exactly sure what's going on in this particular issue, but I'll throw it out there for you if you give us some information. So apparently, there's a couple of ponds down on the Burin Peninsula that have seen beavers make a home of them. And apparently, people have been given permission and a license to trap the beavers. The one particular emailer is wondering what's becoming of those beavers. I mean, are they being relocated to a very specific area as terms of the license? Or what's becoming of them? That's a fair question. I mean, his worry is that maybe the beavers are being trapped and killed, because of course the pelt would be of value to somebody. So if you know exactly what's going on down there, and or you're someone who's been given a license for said trapping, then if you can tell us what the results of that trapped beaver would be, we'd appreciate the information. Just a quick reminder, of course, it's summertime, and yes, we're going to see some high temperatures, but some of the heat warnings that have been issued for different parts of the province, which are pretty extensive. So central northeastern Newfoundland, the island of, are expecting temps around the 30-degree mark for the next 48 hours or so. Humidex quite high, into mid to the high 30s. There's also some issues regarding folks in Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick. They're going to see Humidex reach like almost 40 degrees. So BC Interior, talking about the temperature hitting in the 40s, and that doesn't even include the Humidex. The thought that was offered via email is that if you have some seniors in your world, whether it be family or friends or neighbours, when it gets as hot as it's going to be in certain parts of the province over the next couple of days, it might be worthwhile to simply give a knock to ensure that they're doing okay, and if they need anything, maybe you're able to help them out, because staying cool is extremely difficult. It's one thing you've had the ability to, for instance, install a mini split or something in your home, which can really make it quite comfortable, but not everybody has that quote-unquote luxury available, so maybe that's something that you can give some thought to. And we did ask Minister Parsons about the proposal out in Corner Brook between the Corner Brook Port Corporation and their Memorandum of Understanding with CWP Global. We will indeed reach out to the company to walk us through, because we've had plenty of conversations regarding the electrolysis, the wind farms, the green hydrogen to be shipped for export to Germany in this case via ammonia. But we haven't had much in the way of conversations about green steel. And there is a thirst for it. If you have a just quick Google search about what the appetite is for greener products, and of course we have to be careful when we just use the label or the tag of green, because there's no such thing as anything being perfectly green. There's always going to be some components to build, whether it is a solar panel or a wind turbine or whatever the case may be, or whatever is required to build this so-called green steel or green iron, and the inclusion of a hot briquette iron plant at the port itself. So there's a lot to be yet to be fully understood there. And we are trying to figure out exactly how many appeals have been filed regarding World Energy GH2 and their proposal on the Port of Port Peninsula. We know of one for sure official appeal that was submitted inside the timeline, and we'll see if we can get an update about status of it and whether or not there have been more formal appeals. And there's a couple of curious reactions to a question that I asked Minister Parsons about social license. It is a concept that's been included in all of these types of applications for industrial motives, whether it be for expansion in mining, whether it be for the wind turbines on the Port Peninsula. It's hard to come up with an answer. And this is not about what the minister said or didn't say, but it's hard to come up with how people define a social license, because it's going to be part of it. Now, we can all look at the economic benefits. We can all look at environmental sensitivities. We can talk about expanded tax base and infrastructure to be included in your area. But the whole issue about who has or does not have social license, and what's the government's role in assessing it? Because folks who are opposed to one industrial expansion or a new industry like the onshore wind farms, the folks who are opposed to it, they'll say that they've got the numbers that don't support it. That means that there will be and there cannot be any social license, versus the proponent will tell us the exact opposite about how many people are in favor of bringing these types of projects to where people live. So again, I think we do have to come up with some sort of formula that can be applied across the board for public consultation and a measurement about what support looks like, what constitutes social license. Is it first past the post? Is it 50% plus one is good enough? And then how do you actually get a measure of it? Are we going to find ourselves in a world where every single time the concept of social license is broached, we're going to have a referendum? And anybody the age of majority gets to vote? Or what does constitute the eligible age to participate? Because for years into the future, for decades in the future, the implications will be on the ground. Whether that be the opportunity to get a job in the industry, or whether that be some of your concerns regarding, for instance, the environment. So we've got to figure that one out, because we do indeed have elected governments that, for better or worse, we've put our faith in to do this type of work, to make these types of decisions. So where does it begin and where does it end with me having ongoing say in what we should or should not be doing? Because that becomes pretty unwieldy if every time there's a Beta Nord on the table, every time there's a World Energy GH2 on the table, every time there's a CWP Global on the table, that we have to go directly to the people, put forward a referendum. Because then, of course, it's whether or not we've got the amount of information required to make an informed decision as to whether something gets the thumbs up or the thumbs down, which is also sometimes lacking in some of these conversations. Final check of the morning on the Twitter box. We're VOCM Open Line. You know what to do. Follow us there. Let's see. So, Tony's filling me in. And I asked the question about when there was an interruption in the production of Come From Away in Gander last year, whether or not they added those lost shows to the end of the run to accommodate the folks who scrambled to get those tickets. Apparently so. They did put off some extra shows and matinees to cover the lost shows last year. I appreciate the information. I couldn't drag it out of my poor, tortured mind. All right, our email address is openline@vocm.com. And my favorite is when you join us live on the program, which you can do tomorrow morning when we pick up this conversation right here on VOCM and Big Land FM's Open Line. On behalf of the producer, David Williams, I'm your host, Paddy Daly. Have yourself a safe, fun, happy day. We'll talk in the morning. Bye-bye.
Hello, it is Ryan, and we could all use an extra bright spot in our day, couldn't we? Just to make up for things like sitting in traffic, doing the dishes, counting your steps, all the mundane stuff. That is why I'm such a big fan of Chumba Casino. Chumba Casino has all your favorite social casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere with daily bonuses. That should brighten your day a little. Actually, a lot. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com. That's ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.